Who are you?
I'm Buffy, the vampire slayer, and you are?
For decades, vampires have ruled the horror landscape, from Dracula to Count Orlok. These creatures of the night have preyed upon young, innocent girls, feasting upon their blood and turning them into the undead. With every vampire tale comes a slayer, a man whose only mission is to rid the world of these monsters risen from the grave. But what if the slayer turned out to be one of these young girls? What if instead of being preyed upon and stalked by the vampires, instead she was the one stalking them? This was the exact thing Joss Whedon wanted to do when he created the cultural phenomenon that was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Joss Whedon started his career as a spec writer, until eventually getting his first gig on the show Roseanne. From there, he would be known as a talented script doctor, a writer that would come in and fix scripts that were nearly there, but needed someone to take them to the next level. He worked on movies like Speed and Twister, and was nominated for an Academy Award for his work on the Pixar animated movie Toy Story. Joss Whedon was also a big fan of horror movies. However, there was something that always troubled him. In all these movies, the girls were always the victim. They were basically included just so they could take their tops off and get killed by the monster. He grew tired of the trope, so he began writing a movie called Rhonda the Immortal Waitress, a film about a seemingly ordinary woman who deep down has an extraordinary gift. As the script progressed, however, it quickly changed into Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Joss Whedon took his script about a young valley girl fighting the forces of darkness and sent it to a small production company called Sandollar, a company that was founded by singer-songwriter Dolly Parton. The script found its way to the desk of producer Gail Berman, a woman who started her career as the youngest female producer on Broadway. Gail loved the script, but thought it would make for a better TV series than a movie, but no one was interested in the idea as a TV show. Fox quickly swooped in and made a deal, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer was rushed into production to meet the following summer's movie lineup. Buffy the Vampire Slayer follows Buffy, played by Kristy Swanson, as she learns she is the next in line of a series of girls destined to be a vampire slayer. The movie is part horror, part comedy, though it's very light on the horror. To say production on the movie was tumultuous would be a bit of an understatement.
Does the word duh mean anything to you?
The movie had a very low budget of only around $7 million, and even getting this amount was like pulling teeth, because no one wanted to take a chance on a movie called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The film's producer, Howard Rosenman, turned to two friends of his, independent film producers Kaz Kazooie and his wife Fran Rubel Kazooie. Once they were in the picture, the money started to roll in. However, they still needed a director, and no one seemed to want the job. Howard once again turned to Fran, who directed a little movie called Tokyo Pop, and she said yes almost immediately. She thought Buffy the Vampire Slayer sounded so stupid, how could she not do it? Fran took the script home and she thought it was hilarious. One thing she wanted to do though was add in martial arts. Fran had always been a fan of martial arts and figured what if Buffy were to use it as a means of combating the forces of darkness? With the funding, script, and director all ready to go, it was time to find their Buffy. They looked at the young ladies that were on their way up in Hollywood. Alyssa Milano was the first one considered, but the deal fell through. Alicia Silverstone wanted the role, but the producers felt she was too young at the time. They tried getting Drew Barrymore, but she passed on the movie. Eventually, they found their Buffy in 22-year-old Kristy Swanson. With Buffy cast, it was now time to find her love interest. For the role of Pike, the producers lucked out when they cast Luke Perry, who was white hot at the time with his show 90210. Fran was surprised they got him because his character would be playing second fiddle to Buffy, which wasn't really the norm at the time, especially for someone whose career was at an all-time high. The film also landed two Hollywood legends when they cast Rutger Hauer, best known for his role in Blade Runner as Buffy's main nemesis Lothos, and Donald Sutherland as Merrick, a man whose only mission in life is to train the Slayer so she can battle against the forces of darkness. One of the more controversial castings was Paul Rubens as Amlin, Lothos' right-hand vampire. Just 1 year prior, Paul had been arrested and charged with exposing himself inside an adult theater, which was only made worse by the fact that he was best known as Pee Wee Herman on the children's show Pee Wee's Playhouse. What's funny is his character was dressed to look like his mugshot as kind of an FU to everyone that turned their backs on him.
Hi, how's it going?
And at the end of the day, he really is one of the most, if not the most memorable part of the movie.
Kill him a lot.
The film had to be out that summer, and because of this, they only had 5 weeks to shoot the movie. They also had to work around Luke Perry's 90210 filming schedule, so things were really tight. Filming on the movie began on February 20th, 1992, and almost immediately problems began. Since they only had a 29-day shooting schedule, Fran decided to allow the cast and crew to improvise a lot of the scenes, and this led to a lot of confusion. No one really knew what they were going to be doing when it came time to shoot. Take Paul Rubin's death scene for instance. In this scene, his character is stabbed with a wooden stake and dies, only to then rise back up and die again. He did this over and over, and the crew thought it was so funny that they kept it in the movie. Not everyone was happy with the changes though. The movie's main star, Christy Swanson, begged Fran to give her more direction. She was used to productions where the producers were more hands-on and told the actors what they wanted, but for Fran, she wanted the actors to create the characters themselves. Donald Sutherland was another actor who didn't like how the production was being handled. In fact, he was actually kind of embarrassed to be working on a movie called Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I couldn't bring myself to say I was making a film called Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Joss Whedon's original script was a lot darker in tone. It was still funny, but a lot of his jokes were removed and the overall feeling of the movie when it was made was much lighter. Fox Studios even agreed with Joss, asking Fran to make the movie scarier, but she didn't think the movie would be appropriate for a 13-14-year-old audience if she did. So she went against everyone's wishes and just kept doing her thing. Joss Whedon grew so frustrated that he eventually left the project and to this day still harbors a lot of resentment towards Donald Sutherland, who he believes was intentionally sabotaging his movie by changing lines and refusing to do certain things, but strangely not Fran, who was really the one who gave the actors the freedom to do whatever they wanted and completely changed the tone of the movie to suit her vision. And in defense of Donald Sutherland being embarrassed by the movie or not really enjoying the experience, a lot of actors have taken roles they felt were beneath them simply to get a payday. Betsy Palmer did Friday the 13th so she could buy a new car, and Michael Caine, who starred in Jaws 4: The Revenge, famously said,
"Someone said to me, I saw that Jaws 4. He said, it stinks. I said, I haven't seen it. I said, but I've seen the house it bought my mother and it's marvelous."
So I'm not about to crucify Donald Sutherland simply because the filming of the movie was miserable when that really should fall on the shoulders of Fran.
This is your defense. Please.
When the movie released on July 31st, 1992, it got some decently positive reviews. However, the box office did not reflect them. It only managed to pull in roughly $16.6 million during its entire theatrical run, against a nearly $7 million budget, which isn't good. The film may not have been a commercial success, but it has grown something of a cult following over the years. It also opened the door for some Hollywood up-and-comers that would make a much bigger mark on the entertainment landscape, like David Arquette, Thomas Jane, and Academy Award winners Ben Affleck in an uncredited role, and Hilary Swank. With the movie firmly behind Joss Whedon, he moved on to bigger and better things. However, a few years later, interest in a Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV series would start to pick up. Fran Rubel Kazooie would call up Gail Berman and the two women would put together a presentation for a proposed Buffy television series. But before they could do that, they had to run it by Joss Whedon first. When the rights to his original screenplay were sold, part of the deal was if there were any talks about a TV show, he would have to be involved. However, the ladies were unsure if he would have any interest, as Joss was more of a movie guy and felt TV was beneath him. When they contacted his agent, even his agent was unsure if this was something he would want to do. But when Joss's agent called them back, he told them a Buffy the Vampire Slayer television show was the only thing he wanted to do. One of the main points made in their pitch was that there was no strong young female representation on TV. You had the Spice Girls going around shouting girl power, but that felt more like a corporate phrase than something that was actually pushing the idea of strong women. Dana Scully from The X-Files was definitely a strong female character, but I guess they forgot about her in their pitches to the studios.
Sure, fine, whatever.
When the trio finally pitched their idea, they received a lot of sideways glances and eye rolls. No one seemed to get what they were going for. The idea of a young girl fighting vampires sounded ludicrous. While Fox Studios, the studio that made the film, did show interest initially, they too eventually turned the project down. Luckily for them, Warner Brothers had just come out with a new channel called the WB and was looking to build an audience and felt a show about a young woman protecting the sleepy town of Sunnydale may help them attract a young female market. When WB gave them the go-ahead to film a pilot episode, the search for a cast began. The pressure was on for Joss because time was of the essence. He had to make sure he picked the perfect young woman for Buffy, or the pilot just wouldn't work. A young actress named Sarah Michelle Gellar came to his attention. She had already been working for years, winning an Emmy for her work on All My Children. Joss thought she would be perfect for Cordelia. Sarah watched the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie in preparation for her talk with Joss, not knowing that Joss wanted to go back to his original vision of what Buffy should be. Sarah continued to talk with Josh over what he wanted out of Buffy, trying to understand what exactly he was looking for. She continued pressuring him and auditioning over and over until Joss finally came to his senses and realized that this was his girl. With the most pivotal character cast, it was now time to fill in the other roles, but they were no less important because if the chemistry wasn't there, then it wouldn't work. Rupert Giles, Buffy's watcher and the school's librarian, was given to Anthony Stewart Head, a man who brought a much more nuanced approach to the character when compared to the others that made Rupert feel more wooden and stuck up. I can only imagine how the other actors were if they were considered wooden and stuck up and not Anthony. The role of Cordelia was the next one to be cast. Charisma Carpenter, who was already working on a series called Malibu Shores, was also waiting tables and going to school to get her teaching degree when her manager called her up and told her they wanted her for Cordelia. She originally auditioned for the role of Buffy, but Cordelia is just perfect for her. Nicholas Brendon was chosen for the role of Xander Harris, the goofball of the friend group and character Joss most felt like he connected with. Nicholas worked a bit in Hollywood, mostly as a production assistant. He barely knew anything when it came to filming a show or acting, but he made everyone laugh, and it was that humor that helped land him the role of Xander. And lastly, Buffy's best friend, Willow Rosenberg, would be played by Riff Regan, an unusual choice as she didn't look like the stereotypical nerd. With the cast assembled, it was now time to film the pilot. The pilot was partly funded by Joss, and was never actually meant to be seen outside of the WB executives who ordered it. The pilot episode is only 25 minutes long and follows the plot of the first episode fairly closely, with some of the scenes being nearly identical. The pilot can be found on the DVD sets, and it's even been uploaded to YouTube if anyone wants to watch it. With the pilot completed, they sent it to the WB. Several excruciating months go by, and WB finally gets back to them, and unfortunately, they were passed over. WB instead decided to go with another show called Seventh Heaven, a decision that I'm sure won't come back to haunt them. At this point, it seemed like the show was dead, but after 4 more months, the WB got a hold of the trio and told them they wanted 12 episodes, which were going to be used to replace another show called Savannah that was being cancelled. Everyone was excited, except the show order came with one teeny tiny stipulation. Willow had to be recast. Riff Regan just didn't do anything for the figureheads at WB, so a casting call was put out and eventually they settled on Allison Hannigan. Allison had been acting from a very young age, with her first big movie role being in the 1988 comedy My Stepmother is an Alien, which is something we'll come back to later in the video. Allison just brought something different to the character. While everyone else played Willow like a down and depressed dork, Allison had a hopeful energy to her character that they just loved. Also, no offense to Riff Regan, but there just wasn't any chemistry. The final piece to the Buffy puzzle was David Boreanaz as Angel. Angel was never intended to move past the 2-episode series premiere, but was so well liked that he managed to stay on. David was a struggling actor at the time, until one day he was spotted walking his dog by his future manager. Marcia Schulman, the original casting director on Buffy, knew they had their Angel when she saw him, because he had the good looks and a presence about him that is hard to find. Production for season 1 began in the summer of 1996, in order to meet the mid-season 1997 date that WB wanted. Joss Whedon would serve as showrunner, with longtime friend David Greenwalt serving as co-executive producer. David had just come off working on season 4 of The X-Files, so he was no stranger to the ins and outs of TV. Joss, on the other hand, may have been in a little over his head. He was used to the long shooting schedules and bigger budgets of movies, but TV was an entirely different beast. For Buffy, each episode would have 8 days of prep, with only 8 days for filming. There was also a much smaller budget, so they really had to plan everything out. This really came to head when Joss planned an elaborate dream sequence for the very first episode that would have tied the movie to the series. It would have helped explain to the viewer what a Slayer was, and that Buffy had lost her previous watcher before being moved from LA to Sunnydale with her mother. However, this wasn't feasible, and instead Joss inserted brief scenes from episodes later on in the season and kept all the explaining of what a Slayer was to the library when Buffy first meets Giles. This would be a common go-to when Joss needed to have some expository dialogue, but he always did what he could to avoid what he would call talking against a wall. Joss also planned to include Eric Balfour's Jesse in the opening credits, so viewers would think he was a main cast member. However, budget and time restraints made it impossible for him to create an entire second set of credits just to fake out the audience. He wanted to take away the comfort from the viewers and make them feel like no one was safe on this show. Joss would eventually get to use this idea much later in the series, but we'll get there. The original vision for the series was to create a monster of the week type show. Every week a monster type would show up for Buffy and her friends to defeat, with a main monster that the group would have to face at the end of the season that would become known as the Big Bad. The monsters would also be something of a metaphor for a challenge or fear that teens deal with growing up. This idea only really lasted the first season and was abandoned for a more serialized approach. Although there still would be one-off monsters, the episodes would also continue to drive the main stories forward.
Grr, arg.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer would debut March 10th, 1997 with the episodes Welcome to Hellmouth and The Harvest. The episodes were shown as a back-to-back special premiere event and drew around 3.4 million viewers. Welcome to Hellmouth introduces us to the main cast: Buffy, Giles, Cordelia, Xander, and Willow, and supporting cast like Angel, Buffy's mom Joyce, Darla, Luke, and the Master, who would be Season 1's Big Bad. Julie Benz, who played Darla, also appeared in the pilot that was shot and was the test for what would be called Vamp Face. In the Buffy movie, the vampires basically look like normal humans. However, Joss wanted to change things up for the television show so they'd have a more demonic looking appearance. Another reason for the vamp face was so it wouldn't look like Buffy was killing normal everyday people. You couldn't have her going around staking what just looked like normal teenagers. The Master, who was played by character actor Mark Metcalf, had his vamp face designed around looking like a bat. It was also decided he would always be in vamp face as a way to show how much older and more powerful he was when compared to the lesser vampires. The decision was made all the way back in the pilot to have the vampires turn to dust after being killed. It just made it easier with the censors to have the body explode in a poof of dust than having bloody corpses laying everywhere. This also helped from a storytelling reason as well, because you couldn't have the characters disposing the bodies of dead vampires every episode, something that was very apparent in the movie version.
Detention, detention. Detention, detention.
Welcome to Hellmouth has Buffy and her mother moving to Sunnydale after Buffy was kicked out of her previous school for burning down the school's gym, which was supposed to happen in the movie, but that was removed because it was deemed to be too dark and too costly. So while the show doesn't exactly call back to the movie, it does reference to the original script that Joss Whedon had written. Buffy then goes to Sunnydale High where she meets Xander, Cordelia, Willow, and Giles, who immediately knows she is the Slayer. Bodies start to pile up, and Buffy, who is reluctant in her duties as the Slayer, speaks with Giles where Xander overhears them talking, and now he knows she's the Slayer. Buffy then runs into Angel, a mysterious yet handsome fellow who warns her Sunnydale sits above the Hellmouth, which is close to opening, and that the harvest is coming. Buffy then tells Willow to seize the moment while at the Bronze, leading to her leaving with a vampire. Willow is then led to a crypt where a clearly bitten Jesse arrives with Darla, and before things can get any worse, Buffy arrives and gets into a little scuffle with the vamps. Welcome to Hellmouth is fun, but going back to these early episodes all these years later, they all feel really cheap and quaint. Not in a bad way, they just almost feel like a high school stage play. The Harvest picks up where the previous episode left off. Buffy manages to escape with her friends, except for poor Jesse, who the Master decides to use as bait. Xander and Willow are given a brief explanation on what it is Buffy does, and Willow, being the computer whiz that she is able to get the schematics of the town's tunnel system, so Buffy can find where the vampires are coming from. Buffy and Xander go down into the tunnels, where they run into an ambush put forth by Xander's friend Jesse, who is now a vampire. The two barely manage to escape, and Luke drinks the Master's blood, turning him into the vessel, which will grant the Master more and more power the more people Luke kills. Could they not have come up with a more menacing name than Luke though? I love Brian Thompson and he should always be in things, but they could have come up with something a little better. Luke, aka the Vessel, will now be used to open the Hellmouth, but of course Buffy puts a stop to that right quick when she tricks him into thinking it's daylight outside, only to stake him in the heart, proving he's more muscle than brains. Like I mentioned earlier, Jesse was supposed to be in the opening credits, so his death would come as a shock to the audience. However, what always makes me laugh is even though Jesse is supposed to be one of Xander's best friends, Xander barely reacts after his friend is killed. 2-part premiere does a good job setting the tone of what is to come, but like all shows during this time period, it would still be a while before it really found its footing. The Witch would be Buffy's first foray into full Monster of the Week. There's no master or any connecting storylines. Instead, it has the girls trying out for cheerleading squad when strange things begin to happen. Cordelia ends up losing her eyesight, another girl's mouth goes completely missing, even Buffy gets a little loopy and starts acting unlike herself. The worst one is the girl in the beginning that spontaneously combusts into flames. Unless that's part of her routine, then bravo. The episode is really about a young girl named Amy who has to live in the shadow of her mother, who was this amazing cheerleader. Except it turns out her mother is a witch and has switched bodies with her daughter because she believes Amy is wasting her youth. The Witch is a fine episode dealing with obsessive parents that want their kids to succeed at any cost. Like those weird parents that put their kids in pageants or take Little League a little too seriously. Luckily for me, my parents didn't even finish high school, so I really didn't have to worry about being in anyone's shadow. Amy will return sporadically throughout the series, and there's even one episode in season 3 where she comes back with a completely different hairstyle, and when I saw her sitting with the Scoobies, I was like, who the hell is that? It had been a while between watching seasons 1 and 3 that I had completely forgotten who the hell she was, even with the characters mentioning her name. Still though, The Witch is a fine episode with some pretty funny moments, especially when Xander thinks Buffy is flirting with him. Now we're getting into some weird stuff. Teacher's Pet is about a new substitute teacher that becomes a little too friendly with Xander. In fact, she turns out to be a giant monster praying mantis that needs virgins for her mating ritual. And in typical praying mantis fashion, after she mates, she eats your head. This episode is all about an older person, usually some kind of authority figure, preying on younger teens or kids. And in this case, literally. From Xander's perspective, it's awesome. You've got this attractive teacher who wants you, but going back to this as a much older man, it's so damn creepy. But I get it. I had teachers I had crushes on too, except they never invited me over for a mating ritual. It's also funny how Xander is getting picked on in the episode by some guys for being a virgin, only to find out at the end that one of his bullies is one too. I think it's pretty obvious why they cast Mushetta Vander as the she-mantis. I mean, she's a really good actress.
You're alive. Too bad you will die.
This theme of older people preying on the young is a theme that carries on throughout this series, and something I never really noticed before. One takeaway from the episode is if you're any kind of authority figure and you're nice to Buffy, you're more than likely going to wind up missing your head. I would also like to give props to the effects department because the mantis monster with all its floppy limbs is kind of awesome. Never Kill a Boy on the First Date shows the double life Buffy has to lead in order to be the Slayer. It has Buffy trying to go out on a date with this dorky guy named Owen, who she thinks is so cute, but he's kind of an idiot. And while doing this, she also has to juggle her responsibilities of being the Slayer. This is where Buffy really starts to feel like a classic superhero, and if I had to choose one, I'd go with Spider-Man. Buffy and Peter Parker both have to deal with trying to be a normal teenager while also protecting those they care about because they were given this extraordinary gift.
Mine is Superman. Remember the motto? With great power comes great responsibility.
It might not be a power either of them want, but they were both given it for a reason. While Buffy tries dating and slaying, we also have the rise of the Anointed One, a messiah of sorts that will lead Buffy into the depths of hell where she'll be killed by the Master. They do a pretty good job making you think it's going to be this one guy who's sort of like one of those doomsday prophesizers, but it actually turns out to be a little boy, which is a nice bait and switch. Overall a decent episode, but nothing to write home about. The Pack is one of the strangest episodes in the series. It's about a hyena god who possesses Xander and some school bullies, and basically turns them into the Pack. Xander becomes more aggressive and even turns on his friends. The Pack deals with themes of bullying and joining the wrong crowd. I think we've all experienced people who think they're hilarious simply because they pick on people who they believe are weaker than them, which is fitting that they were possessed by a hyena because hyenas are known for attacking the weakest members of a herd or even just being scavengers. They wouldn't dare try to pick on someone who is stronger than them.
You gonna say something to me?
You ever see the video of the lion surrounded by like 20 hyenas and everything looks very grim for the lion until another male shows up and the hyenas take off? Same vibes. The Pack doesn't have a lot going for it, but it does have one important thing that will affect the show moving forward, and that is the murder of Principal Flutie. Principal Flutie made the unwise choice of being friendly to Buffy, which meant he had to die. And how does he die? Well, the pack eats him. However, conveniently, for some reason, Xander isn't with the group when this happens. I guess they had to find a reason for Xander not to be with the pack, because we can't have one of the main characters eating a principal, even if he is under a spell. But this will open up the principal position for one Principal Snyder, who will be a thorn in the Scooby side for the foreseeable future. Angel gives us more information into just who this mystery man really is. The episode begins with the Master sending the three warrior vampires that can kill the Slayer. What they really amount to is 3 vampires that look like they're on their way to the Ren Fair. The 3 fail to kill Buffy, so they're all dusted for their terrible cosplays. Meanwhile, Angel hides out at Buffy's and reveals he's much older than her, and then proceeds to kiss her, going back to the whole older people preying upon children we spoke about with Teacher's Pet. Buffy then discovers Angel is a vampire, which is obviously quite shocking. There's a lot of backstory in this one. We learn Darla sired Angel and the two used to be a thing. And then there's a mix-up when Buffy sees Angel with her injured mother, not knowing it was Darla that actually attacked her, which is a classic comedy mix-up. Eventually, Buffy learns that Angel wasn't the one that attacked her mother, and in a very rare occasion, when Buffy fights Darla, Darla brings handguns to a crossbow fight. Why more vampires don't just bring fully automatic weapons when fighting Buffy, I'll never understand. It seems like it would be a lot more effective than chainmail. Angel's gypsy curse that gave him a soul is also revealed, though we'll learn more about that at a later time. Since it was the 90s, I think every show had to do an episode about the dangers of meeting people online, and Buffy was no different. iRobot You Jane has a demon named Moloch get trapped inside a book, and then centuries later when Willow scans the book, she scans the demon into the computer. Willow starts an online relationship with a boy named Malcolm, but Buffy becomes suspicious because there's no way a boy would like Willow. We also get introduced to a new character, the computer teacher, Miss Calendar, who is the teacher Xander should really be crushing over. Because it's Buffy though, she can't just be a teacher, and is what she calls herself, a techno-pagan, which is just so 90s. One of my favorite parts about the episode is how adverse Giles is to computers. Like, oh no, not scary technology. The makeup effects for Moloch are pretty great as well. For a low-budget show, they really didn't skimp on trying to make the monsters look scary. Moloch is barely on screen in the beginning, but they still go out of their way to create a cool-looking demon. Even when Moloch/Malcolm is all robotic, as cheesy as it is, it's still pretty cool. He looks like a combination of the Predator and the cyber demon from Doom. Let's just hope the next time Willow meets a guy, he isn't secretly a monster.
Foreshadowing as a narrative device.
Just like how every 90s show had to have an episode about the dangers of technology, every anthology show or shows with a Monster of the Week type format had to have an episode about a killer doll. The Puppet Show is about a kid named Morgan and his dummy Sid, who turns out to be alive. As bodies begin to pile up with their hearts ripped out of their chest or their brains missing, Buffy and the gang decide they need to put an end to it before it goes any further. The interesting thing about this episode is the puppet isn't actually the one doing the killing. In a unique twist, the puppet is actually trying to kill a demon that cursed him in that body. It's pretty convenient that the dummy and demon both happen to be in the same place at the same time. But it's Sunnydale. I guess the town isn't that big. The episode is fine for what it is. The puppet is kind of a pervert, so there's a lot of wood jokes, and Principal Snyder makes his debut, forcing the Scoobies to be a part of the talent show, which leads to some fun moments. Nightmares follows a young boy in a coma named Billy who's causing everyone's worst fears to come to life. Xander winds up without clothes in school, Buffy's father blames her for his divorce with her mother, Giles can no longer read, and Cordelia has a bad hair day. The episode is a typical Nightmares Come to Life episode that we've seen in other shows and movies. The difference here though is the main culprit of the nightmares is a monster with a loaf of bread for a hand. I think it's supposed to be a bat, but it looks like a giant loaf of bread to me. The monster is actually the manifestation of Billy's nightmare, which is his coach who put him in a coma after he blamed Billy for losing the big game. Remember when I talked about parents taking Little League way too seriously? The monster isn't great and the makeup is subpar when compared to what we've seen so far. One of the nightmares Buffy is faced with is being buried alive by the Master, something Sarah Michelle Gellar has an issue with in real life. During an interview with Rolling Stone magazine back in 1998, she told them she has an irrational fear of being buried alive and cemeteries. However, when she mentioned this, the word never got back to the proper parties in time, so she was sort of forced to do the scene. It's interesting that she would reveal now that she's terrified of cemeteries, when nearly every single episode begins in one. Out of Sight, Out of Mind takes a look at what I think a lot of teenagers deal with while in high school. The feeling that no one notices you or no one cares, like you're invisible to everyone around you. Buffy takes this idea and makes it literal when a teen girl becomes invisible, because no matter how hard she tries, no one pays any attention to her. It's not until a bunch of mysterious accidents start happening that Buffy takes notice and realizes that a missing girl named Marcy may be the culprit. The metaphor is a bit on the nose, but the episode does a good job of representing the themes. Clea Duvall does a good job as Marcy, but whatever happened to her? It feels like she used to be in everything during the 90s, but after that she sort of disappeared. Also, I'm counting this episode as the Invisible Man stand-in because every show has to have their own version of the Universal Monsters. That ending with the FBI taking Marcy away also gives me some X-Files vibes. I can only imagine she's being shipped off to the Syndicate right about now. Not a bad episode, but like the character Marcy, it's one that I often forget exists. Well, the whole season has been leading up to this episode. The prophecy says that Buffy will be led to hell where the Master will kill her, and that's basically what happens. Buffy discovers what her destiny is and goes along with it in an attempt to kill the Master. Except he's too powerful for her. The Master hypnotizes Buffy and then kills her, using her blood to escape his prison. Lucky for her, Angel and Xander arrive, and Xander is able to resuscitate Buffy. Buffy has a second showdown with the Master, and you're expecting this awesome fight scene after all this buildup. But nope, she just tosses him through a window where he lands on a pointy piece of wood. I'm wondering if this is supposed to represent Joss taking Buffy back after what happened to his movie. There's a few things that I think hint to this, but I could be reaching. First, there's Buffy's outfit for the dance. It looks kind of similar to Christy Swanson's from the movie, especially with the jacket. Also, how easily the Master is able to hypnotize her, and then later on she's able to break herself free from it. Whether these things are intentional or not, I'm not sure, but they come off that way. I also love the tentacle monster that bursts out of the library floor. I forgot how much Lovecraft influence there was on this show. But going back and rewatching it, it was abundantly clear that someone was a Lovecraft fan. The great thing about the tentacle monster was each tentacle was a person inside of a costume. They didn't have the budget to do CGI, so they opted for the less costly practical option, which was the better choice. There was also worry that the show wouldn't get picked up for a second season, so they made the end as definitive as possible. So if they didn't come back, at least it wasn't left on a cliffhanger, something that a lot of shows today could learn from. The first season was a decent start to the show, though the Monster of the Week format would pretty much be dropped moving forward. Joss realized the soap opera aspect is what was really bringing in the audience, though for me, since I was around 11 at the time, it was the pretty girls and the monsters. You put pretty girls and monsters in anything back in the day, and there was a good chance I'd watch it. As great as the characters and set pieces are in the show, it really wouldn't be the same without its amazing theme song. When the show's first season was first being produced, Joss Whedon was hard at work trying to find the right theme for the show. They looked at many professional film and TV composers, but no one brought the sound they were looking for. It wasn't until Allison Hannigan suggested they check out a local band called Nerf Herder that they finally found what they were looking for. What's so great about the Buffy theme is how it starts out sort of typical gothic sounding, something you'd expect from a show about vampires. But after only a few seconds, that guitar kicks in and you know you're in for something special. Beyond the theme song, music is a big part of the show. Each episode had a new piece of music written for it, and it was treated like a miniature weekly movie. And if you're gonna talk music, you can't forget the Bronze. The Bronze was an all-ages club the Scoobies would visit most episodes just to hang out and discuss whatever was going on at the time. There was always music playing, and usually it was local bands that someone was a friend of a friend of. On a few rare occasions though, they actually got some decently big names to appear. Biff Naked appeared in the Season 4 episode The Harsh Light of Day, Michelle Branch appeared in the Season 6 episode Tabula Rasa, and Nerf Herder themselves appeared in the Season 7 episode Empty Places.
Grr, arg.
After the first season, there were doubts that a second season would even happen. Ratings were not great, especially when compared to some of the bigger networks. However, if you compared the ratings to shows that come out today, it blows them all out of the water. All fears were put to rest, however, when the show was picked up for a second season, and the Season 2 opener, When She Was Bad, would debut September 15th, 1997. When She Was Bad has a clearly traumatized Buffy dealing with the after effects of what she went through with the Master. She was killed and brought back, but the experience of it all clearly took a big part of her with it. Obviously, confronting something that you were deathly afraid of would do things to someone, but what always bugged me about this episode was how she treated her friends, especially Xander. Buffy knows Xander likes her, yet she uses this against him, so she can make Angel feel jealous. She turned Xander down at the end of season 1 when he asked her to the dance, because she didn't want to ruin their friendship, and then here she is grinding all over him, which is definitely sending mixed signals. Buffy then discovers the Anointed One is trying to resurrect the Master using her friends and the Master's bones. But once she deals with that, she's suddenly all better again. I don't know if the episode was trying to comment on the irrationality of teenagers, but this episode always made Buffy feel a little out of character for me. It does, however, put a stake in the Master ever returning again, pun intended. Some Assembly Required gives us our Frankenstein insert when various body parts of deceased girls begin to go missing, as a group of teen boys are trying to build the perfect woman, and the only thing missing is a head, Cordelia's head to be exact. There's not a whole lot to this one. You get some jealousy with Angel over Buffy spending too much time with Xander, Giles and Jenny Calendar go out on their first date, and you've got a couple teenagers trying to build a woman for the one teenager's undead brother. What I want to know is, how do these seemingly average teenagers have the capability to bring a corpse back to life? I know it's Sunnydale and the Hellmouth might be giving off spooky powers, but come on. The makeup effects on the undead brother Daryl is pretty standard Frankenstein stuff, and the ending basically ends like Frankenstein, with Daryl choosing to be engulfed in flames with his unfinished mate. As good as season 2 is, this one is kind of eh. School Hard is one of the most important episodes in this series, not because it's anything super amazing, but because it introduces the characters Drusilla and Spike. The crux of the episode is Buffy's parent-teacher night at her school, which becomes besieged by vampires, including Spike, who told the Anointed One he would kill the Slayer, as he has kind of a knack for doing that sort of thing. What's funny is, despite the attackers in the episode clearly being vampires, all the adults, including Buffy's mom and school principal, think they're just gang members. In one great moment, Spike has Buffy on the ground and he's just about to kill her. Buffy's mom smacks Spike in the back of the head with an axe, but not the edge of the axe. She hits him with the flat side. I guess she doesn't want to be a cold-blooded killer, but if that were my daughter, I'd be splitting that skull like a coconut. The big takeaway for Buffy in the episode is that her mom becomes more trusting of her, after realizing that she can take care of herself despite what Principal Snyder may or may not have said about her. My absolute favorite moment of the episode is at the end with the Anointed One. Since his introduction in season 1, he's been treated like this huge threat that was going to lead to a big conflict later down the line. But Spike waltzes in and just tosses him into the sunlight. All that build up just to have Spike kill him off like it was nothing. According to Joss Whedon, the Anointed One was going to be the big bad of season 2, but felt because of how quickly the actor was growing, he wouldn't look like a child for much longer, so the decision was made to get rid of him. Inca Mummy Girl gives us yet another Universal Monster stand-in, this time the Mummy, obviously. The episode is about a mummy who sucks the life force out of a Sunnydale student while on a class field trip. The mummy then kills a foreign exchange student that was going to live with Buffy, and much to the delight of Xander, the mummy is a girl. Though he doesn't know she's a mummy. But still, Xander should know something is up if any girl shows any kind of interest in him. This episode also introduces us to Oz, played by Seth Green, who has taken some interest in an Eskimo-clad Willow. Seth Green was actually in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie in a very brief scene near the end as a vampire, making him the only recurring character to appear in the film and the series. And remember when I mentioned My Stepmother is an Alien? Well, not only was Allison Hannigan in the movie, but a young Seth Green also makes an appearance as Allison's little date. What are the odds that they would appear together in a movie as children going on a date, and then almost 10 years later be paired up yet again? It's weird how things work out. The Inca Mummy wasn't exactly evil in the episode, she was more or less cursed. She just wanted a normal life and experience normal things, but was forced to drain the life of others in order to do so. You sort of feel sorry for her, but when she tries to drain the life from Willow, any pity you may have felt for her goes right out the window. Reptile Boy sure is an interesting episode. Again, going back to the theme of older people preying upon younger kids, you've got the typical douchebag college frat guys going after high school aged girls. Reptile Boy basically focuses on a frat house that is offering up the girls as a sort of sacrifice to this reptile god. And when you see this thing, I mean the metaphor mushroom slaps you right in the face. It's obvious the thing is supposed to be phallic. There's just no getting around it. There's a few moments in the episode that make me really cringe. The first is when Buffy is dancing with one of the guys and he says to her, "There's such a thing as being too mature."
There's such a thing as being too mature. You should relax.
Listen, if you're a younger girl and an older guy says anything about being mature or acting mature for your age, please call an adult. That guy does not have your best interest in mind. Another moment is when Buffy accepts a drink from one of the guys, and I'm just screaming in my head saying, "No, don't take it!" Of course, this leads to her being drugged, and when she winds up in another room, is nearly raped by one of the guys, until another one pushes him off and tells him she's not here for fun. At least the monster in the episode looks cool, but I spend so much time just yelling at Buffy to get the f*** out of there. Halloween is one of my all-time favorite episodes of the series, and I think it's pretty obvious why. I love all things Halloween. So you take Halloween and combine it with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and well, you've got yourself a winner. The episode has the residents of Sunnydale turning into whatever the costume they were wearing. Buffy turns into a noblewoman as she was trying to impress Angel, but in turn loses all of her slaying skills. Willow first dons a more risque costume, but quickly throws on a sheet and becomes a ghost. And as an 11-year-old, I was not hating Willow's more risque costume. And Xander becomes a soldier because he was wearing army fatigues and has a plastic gun. All of this was brought about because of an old acquaintance of Giles named Ethan Rayne, who's going to become another pain in the butt for the Scoobies moving forward. Halloween also hinted at a darker backstory for Giles that was going to lead to a spin-off series or direct-to-video movie, but more on that later. The episode is just fun. I love all the Halloween decorations, the costumes, and the overall spooky Halloween vibe of the whole thing. Lie to Me is aptly titled as it features nearly every character telling a lie in some form or another. It's about a friend of Buffy's from LA named Ford who claims he transferred to Sunnydale for his final year, but the real reason he's there is because he's a weirdo vampire groupie who wants to become one. Buffy ends up seeing Angel with Dracula, so she thinks something is going on there. Ford lies about his true intentions with his vampire group, and even Willow lies about helping Angel track down Ford with the internet. It's hard to blame Ford completely for what he does in the episode because it's revealed he has terminal brain cancer, but I'm not sure becoming a vampire is the best way to go about it. Plus, it seems like no matter how you die in Sunnydale, there's a good chance you'll come back as a vampire regardless if you're bitten or not. I think the earth there is cursed. We also learn that Drusilla was sired by Angel, but not before he drove her completely mad by torturing her and killing her entire family. This is also the moment Buffy tells Angel she loves him, but how the hell do you love someone that straight up murdered an entire family and drove a poor girl mad? The Dark Age is a Giles-focused episode and brings back that pesky Ethan Rayne for some of his usual shenanigans. The episode is about a demon that Giles summoned in his younger days that he and his friends sort of used like a drug. However, it got out of hand and they lost control of it. One by one, members of his group are getting killed off, with only Ethan Rayne and himself left. The worst part of the whole thing is how this affects Giles and his relationship with Jenny. At one point, she becomes possessed, and the whole ordeal leaves her so shaken by the end that she doesn't even want to be touched by Giles. So unfortunately for Giles, the things he did in his youth caught up with him and ruined the first relationship he's had in a very long time. It's a good episode that gives more backstories into Giles' murky past, and the makeup throughout the episode isn't too shabby either. This two-parter helps lay down the groundwork for the rest of Season 2, as Drusilla and Spike end up switching places by the end, with Spike now weakened and Drusilla back to full strength. The episode also introduces us to Kendra, a new vampire slayer. Since Buffy technically died during the events of the Season 1 finale, this awakened a second Slayer, which as far as I know canon-wise, this is the first time there have ever been two active Slayers at one time. Buffy also has to contend with a trio of assassins called the Order of Taraka, two of which are human and one that is this dorky looking guy that turns into millions of maggots, which is one of the grossest things to happen in the series so far. I'd also like to mention that assassin or not, Buffy straight up slices one of their throats with her ice skate, and that must do something to her mentally. I mean, this guy was just a human as far as I can tell. Oz and Willow finally meet for real, and Xander and Cordelia start a relationship, which has to be the most unlikely pairing in the show's history. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, I'm just saying no one expected it, at least I didn't. Kendra is a much different Slayer than Buffy. She literally does everything by the book. She takes orders from her watcher and really has no kind of social life. Kendra also acts strange when speaking to Xander. Now, I don't know if this is because she really doesn't know how to interact with men, or if it's because she was raised to be subservient to them. Or she just thinks Xander's cute. Maybe this is explained somewhere and I just missed it, but those are my best guesses. By the end though, both Slayers end up having a better understanding of one another and they become friends. Buffy even gets a greater appreciation for the gifts she's been given, especially since now she knows she isn't alone. Although is she really alone? I mean, she has Willow, Xander, Giles, Angel, and whoever else decides to pop up. Ted guest stars the late great John Ritter as Ted, a man who Buffy's mother starts dating. However, something seems off with Ted. He looks like a normal guy, but he starts to get really aggressive with Buffy. I mean, he straight up smacks her around. This leads to Buffy accidentally killing Ted. And I'm using air quotes because Ted is actually a robot. John Ritter gives a fun performance, especially when he starts getting his wires crossed.
Then you and I want a little gravy with that? Can go away where no one will bother us again.
And I can kind of understand where Buffy is coming from. Seeing a parent date is always weird, especially when the person is a huge pile of trash and you're just hoping they get hit by an 18-wheeler. In good old Sunnydale fashion, the real Ted was an inventor who created a better version of himself to make his wife happy. Except the robot kidnapped his wife and held her captive until she died. It did this over and over and was going to do it with Joyce until the Scooby gang got involved. But how the hell do you explain all this to the police? Buffy's under suspicion for murder and then all of a sudden, there's a bunker full of robot Ted's dead wives. If I were a Sunnydale cop, I'd be asking for a transfer. The one positive of the episode is Giles and Jenny have kissed and made up. Literally. Did you ever have that school project where you had to look after an egg for a week like it was your baby? This is basically what Bad Eggs is. The class is paired up and they're given eggs to look after. But this is Sunnydale eggs. So of course they're all full of weird tentacle monsters that take over your body when they attach to the back of your neck. Bad Eggs feels like a Buffy version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The one thing I don't like about stories like this is how easily the threat is taken care of. Buffy gets swallowed by the big tentacle monster, but killing it kills all the others. Bad Eggs is fine for a throwaway Monster of the Week story, but nothing amazing. Surprise is where things get very interesting. In the episode, it's revealed Jenny Calendar is a gypsy, and her people are responsible for the curse put on Angel. Drusilla and Spike are looking for pieces of an unstoppable monster they call the Judge. Oz asks Willow on a date, and Buffy and Angel get a little intimate. The real takeaway from the episode and thing that will shape the rest of the season and series is the moment between Buffy and Angel. For Buffy, this is her first time being with a man, which is scary enough for a young girl. But what happens in the very next episode is far worse than anything she could have anticipated. Innocence is accurately titled because after Buffy's night with Angel, she's lost what little bit of that childhood innocence she may have had. Making the jump into being with someone is not a choice that one should make lightly because it really does change everything. After a moment of true happiness, Angel's curse comes full circle and he once again becomes the demon Angelus, the true big bad of season 2. It's pretty heartbreaking when Buffy realizes the Angel she loved is gone. But call me a jerk if you want. But when Angel straight up mocks Buffy about their night together, he becomes so evil that for me it becomes so damn funny. This poor girl had this heartbreaking experience and he's like, hey, lighten up honey, it was alright.
Lighten up. It was a good time. It doesn't mean like we have to make a big deal.
Obviously, this whole thing is a metaphor for how guys change after having sex, and the fears young women have when they open themselves up in such an intimate way. From here, Buffy learns of Angel's curse, and they still have to deal with the Judge. The continuity in the show is pretty well done, and I love that Xander has residual military knowledge from the episode Halloween, and is able to use it so the group can get a rocket launcher to kill the Judge. It's just nice that he finally has something he can do. I also want to bid farewell to Brian Thompson, who played the Judge. This is his last time on the show, and if it were up to me, he would have made at least one appearance every season as a different monster. I love him on The X-Files as the alien bounty hunter, and I wish they had used him more. He's got a unique look and build to him that you could have a lot of fun with. But overall, Innocence is one of the highest rated episodes of the series. It was the most watched episode of all time and appears in many top 10 lists. With Willow and Oz now a thing, of course it can't be a normal relationship when they discover Oz is actually a werewolf. So now we have our Wolfman stand-in. Phases is much lighter from the previous episode, which I think was needed because Innocence just sucked all the air out of the room. It's basically a scarier version of Teen Wolf, just without all the basketball. There's a funny moment when Xander thinks one of the school bullies is the werewolf, but he actually turns out to be gay. And then he also thinks Xander is gay. So it leads to some 90s awkwardness, which likely would not be made today. But it at least opens up the bully Larry to having more of a character than just being a bully. Overall, Phases is a fine episode that makes Willow and Oz's relationship a little more interesting. Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered follows a heartbroken Xander who gets broken up with by Cordelia because her friends think he's kind of a loser. So he gets help from Amy the Witch, who casts a love spell so Cordelia can feel the pain he's dealing with. But instead it backfires, and every woman, regardless of age, or even if they're living, fall madly in love with him. This is a classic love spell gone awry. It's more comedic than anything, but the Xander-focused episodes generally are, except for one in season 6 that I absolutely loathe. There's one really fun moment where Angelus is about to kill Xander, but is saved by Drusilla because she loves him. Not something I think even he was expecting. At least by the end of the episode, Cordelia and Xander do make up, but I don't know why she would when he literally had a spell placed on her that would force her to love him. Passion amps up the tension with Buffy and Angel, because since she invited him inside her house, it has basically put her and her mother at risk. Willow and Buffy use a spell that removes Angel's invitation, but he really acts like a crazed ex-boyfriend, doing whatever he can to torment Buffy and her friends. He takes things to the next level when he kills Jenny, who was trying to put the curse back on Angel and return his soul. The most disturbing moment is when Giles returns home and he thinks Jenny is there to see him, but instead he finds her dead body. You then have Buffy and Willow learning of what happened, and Angel just watches them, soaking in their misery. He really has become the most evil force that Buffy has had to endure so far, because he takes so much pleasure in tormenting people. I love when Giles goes rage mode though. Anytime he gets really pissed off, I just want to see him kick some ass. Sure, Buffy has to save him, but Giles is ready and willing to throw hands at a moment's notice. A good episode that just shows how depraved Angel has become. Killed by Death is basically a story about the boogeyman. Buffy comes down with an illness where she's then brought to the hospital, only to discover there's a demon that is targeting sick children. At first she thinks it's a doctor that's killing the kids, but he's actually trying to save them, and gets killed by the demon for his efforts. The children refer to the monster as Death, and after Buffy recovers, she realizes you can only see it if you're sick, so she gives herself the flu. It's very lucky that physical attacks are able to harm these monsters, because if Buffy couldn't punch this thing, then these kids would have no hope. The monster looks pretty good, though he needs to see a dentist about his underbite. There's a standout moment where Angel comes to visit Buffy and has a confrontation with Xander, but beyond that, this is pretty standard stuff. I Only Have Eyes for You is a good little ghost story about regret and second chances. The episode is about two ghosts that keep possessing students and faculty at the school, forcing them to relive the moment they both died. Eventually, Buffy and Angel get possessed and are forced to relive the moment, but because Angel is a vampire and a gunshot doesn't kill him, he's able to come back to Buffy and the two spirits are able to reconcile their relationship and end the curse. Though once Buffy and Angel snap to, he goes right back to being a prick. One of the most interesting aspects of the episode is Principal Snyder and the police both know about the Hellmouth and are doing whatever they can to cover up the fact. Also, we get Spike back in tip-top shape, which is going to make things interesting in the future. Alright, now we're talking. We've got fish monsters. Gilman has always been my favorite of the Universal monsters, so I'm very happy that even Buffy the Vampire Slayer has a Gilman stand-in. The episode is about members of the school swim team turning up dead, but in reality, they're turning into fish monsters. Xander goes undercover joining the swim team and discovers they're all taking steroids, which are admitted through the steam and the sauna. But it's these steroids that are turning the team into these fish monsters. The whole thing is about drug use, obviously focusing on steroids, which are a huge problem in high school sports. I remember being accused of steroids by a doctor when I was like 18, and I was like, no, I just like to eat and lift weights, but thanks for the compliment. In the typical fish monster fashion, they aren't just killing people, but they're also kind of rapey. I mean, Gilman loved the ladies, and so did the fishmen and humanoids from the deep. The swim team coach even tells Buffy that these boys have other needs. Though by the end, the coach was the one to get assaulted, and it was all well deserved. There's another moment in the episode where Buffy is in the car of a guy she kinda likes, and he gets really handsy. And then Buffy is blamed for it all happening because of how she is dressed. even though she's very modestly dressed. It's not like she was just wearing a robe like she was in the episode with Xander's love spell. This episode is generally not a favorite of many, but I love me some fish monsters. Becoming parts 1 and 2 are the season 2 finale and what the season has been building towards. Angel and Drusilla are going to use a stone tablet to awaken a demon Akathla that will suck everything down into hell, while Buffy and a returned Kendra have to do whatever they can to stop them. There's a lot of flashbacks to Angel's past, and even to the first moment he sees Buffy, which also happens to coincide with the moment Buffy is told she's the Slayer. So he's been watching her for some time. Also, she's like 15 here, so why is he watching her so intently? Kendra returns to help Buffy fight this demon Akathla with an enchanted sword, but ends up being killed by Drusilla. While all this is happening, Willow and the others are trying to use the magic Jenny had stored away on a floppy disk to give Angel his soul back, and we get the first real hints of what's to come with regards to Willow and her magic usage. It's interesting that she starts off all about computers, but slowly shifts into the arcane. The real crux of the two-parter is Angel finally getting his soul back, but because Akathla is already being awakened, Buffy has to make one of the most difficult choices and kill him with the enchanted sword or lose everything. Having to kill the person you love more than anything in order to save the world would be a very difficult decision to make, and because of this and everything else that happened, Buffy leaves Sunnydale. Let's not forget Spike helping Buffy. He might be evil, but he likes the world too much to see it be dragged down into the depths of hell. He also leaves Sunnydale with Drusilla, but this is not the last time we'll be seeing him. Season 2 is an overall improvement from Season 1. It does a good job incorporating the Monster of the Week formula, but also serializing the whole thing, so you're always pushing the main storyline forward while also having fun with a little one-off monster. Also, that turn with Angel halfway through the season might be the best arc in the series. It might not be my personal favorite, but just from a drama point of view and how personal it becomes for Buffy, it might be the best.
Grr, arg.
After the events of Season 2, Buffy ran away and secluded herself from everyone, blaming herself for everything that happened. She works at a small diner as a waitress and calls herself Anne. I don't know if this is the case, but this feels like a reference to Joss Whedon's original concept of Rhonda the Immortal Waitress. Buffy then meets a girl named Lily who was part of the vampire groupies from Season 2 and gets involved with some interdimensional demons who are using homeless people as slaves. The highlight of the episode is when Buffy reclaims who she is and calls herself Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This moment was used in tons of promotional material for Season 3 and is a fan favorite. The fight scene at the end of the episode is also pretty iconic. The lighting and setting is great, and sure, you can tell when it's a stunt actor, but it's still a ton of fun. By the end of the episode, Buffy is back where she belongs in Sunnydale and accepts who she is. When Buffy returns, her mother throws together a little party for her in celebration, though her friends have trouble telling her how they really feel, as they felt she abandoned them when she left. Her mother also has to fight to get her daughter back in school since Snyder expelled her. And her mother also brings home a Nigerian mask that brings the dead back to life. But not the dead with sharp fangs, more like the dead with hunger for brains. So yeah, we've got some classic zombies. The real meat of the episode though is everyone getting things off their chest, telling Buffy how her disappearing took a toll on them, especially Buffy's mother. She had no idea what happened to her daughter or where she went. The mental trauma that could have caused is immeasurable. Of course, by the end, everything is worked out. The zombies are dealt with after the mask is destroyed, though I wonder what kind of insurance Buffy's mom has on that house, because it's always getting trashed. The ending is really great too when Giles gets Buffy back into the school by threatening that little toad Snyder. Faith, Hope, and Trick is an important episode to the Buffy mythos because it introduces us to a new Slayer in Faith. After Kendra was killed, it awoke the next in the Slayer line, a much more brash and in-your-face kind of girl, the complete opposite of Buffy, which will come more into play as the season progresses. Faith came to town after her watcher was killed, trying to evade two vampires, Mr. Trick and Kakistos.
He lived for kissing toast.
Do you mean Kakistos?
Maybe it was taquitos.
Faith eventually has to face Kakistos with Buffy, but after seeing Faith deal with something she was afraid of, Buffy uses this strength to tell her friends what happened between herself and Angel the night she had to kill him. And then because Buffy left Angel's ring where he died, he suddenly re-emerges back to life, which is definitely going to complicate Buffy's life even more. Beauty and the Beasts is an episode all about abusive relationships and a little bit of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. As bodies begin to pile up, the group suspects that it could be Oz's doing, as a window in his enclosure was open. Instead, it actually turns out to have been done by a student who's taking some green goo and turning into some kind of a rage monster. Throughout the episode, he abuses his girlfriend and blames her for what he becomes. She even blames herself despite being the victim. The episode does a decent job touching on the themes of abuse, but it's fairly standard. Two big takeaways from the episode is Buffy's guidance counselor winds up dead, because that's what happens when you're nice to Buffy. And two, Buffy reunites with Angel, who ends up saving her at the end. But this only complicates things for her because she has to keep him a secret from everyone, and I'm sure that won't come back to bite her in the ass. Homecoming is an interesting episode as it has Buffy and Cordelia competing to be Homecoming Queen, when Cordelia, who's mistaken to be Faith, is captured alongside Buffy by Mr. Trick, and the two are forced to compete in Slayer Fest 98, which basically boils down to Buffy and Cordelia being hunted by a bunch of assassins, which isn't anything new for Buffy as she's already been hunted down by assassins multiple times. There's some fun back and forth between Buffy and Cordelia, and the two ladies have good chemistry. The most important pieces to this episode, in my opinion, are Xander and Willow kissing, which is definitely going to lead to worse events later on, especially since Cordelia admits to Buffy that she loves Xander, and Mr. Trick ends up being recruited by Season 3's Big Bad, which is Mare Wilkins. Band Candy is one of my favorite episodes of Season 3. The story is about this chocolate that Principal Snyder forces the students to sell. But this isn't just any kind of chocolate. This chocolate turns all the adults into adolescents. While they still look the same, but their attitudes shift back to their teenage selves. There's a lot of fun interactions, especially with Buffy's mom and Giles, who have an awkward moment at the end of the episode after realizing what they did. Ethan Rayne also makes a return, being partly responsible for the chocolates, but this whole thing was set up by the mayor, so he could summon a terrible looking CGI monster that Buffy sets on fire. Luckily, the mayor escapes without Buffy noticing him, but this is really only the beginning of things to come. Band Candy seems to be a fan favorite, and it's hard not to see why. I think this show has some underrated comedic moments, and Anthony Stewart Head has some great comedic timing. Revelations features a new supposed watcher for Faith, but spoilers, she's actually a demon that wants a fancy gauntlet that will give her lightning powers. This show seems to have a lot of artifacts that can lead to the end of the world. The whole setup for the episode is basically an excuse to reveal that Angel has returned, and to start driving a wedge between Buffy and Faith. The episode even shows a bit of Xander's jealous side, because he hates Angel so much that he tells Faith about him so she'll go kill him. The episode ends with Faith not really feeling like she'll be able to trust anyone again, which is just gonna send her down a dark path. Lover's Walk has a broken-hearted Spike return to Sunnydale so we can get Willow to cast a love spell on Drusilla and win her heart back. Willow at the same time is also trying to cast an anti-love spell on her and Xander, so they won't have feelings for one another anymore. But so far, the love spells in Buffy have not worked out so well. I can only imagine the damage an anti-love spell would cause. It's nice to see Spike back, but this episode is all about what happens between Xander and Willow once they've been kidnapped. Fearing they could die, the two share a kiss, but as soon as they do, Oz and Cordelia walk in and see everything as it happens. Things get even worse when Cordelia falls through the steps and gets impaled on some rebar. There's a cheeky little transition to a graveyard that makes you think she dies, but nah, she's recovering in the hospital. By the end of the episode, everyone is just miserable, except for Spike, who seems to be in a better mood. We're starting to see bits and pieces of Spike that I think will make him a fan favorite, and anytime he's with Buffy's mom is always really funny.
You got any of those little marshmallows?
Let me look.
The Wish has a heartbroken Cordelia meeting a girl named Anya, who tries to help her get over Xander by giving her an amulet. Cordelia then makes a wish, wishing that Buffy had never come to Sunnydale, because without her, Cordelia never would have dated Xander. Anya turns out to be a vengeance demon and grants Cordelia's wish, sending her into an alternate timeline where the Master was never killed and humans are rounded up like cattle. Alternate timeline or what if episodes are always fun because you can do things that you'd never be able to do in the main story. I love how dark this timeline is too, how everyone knows the vampires have taken over and are basically just waiting to die. The Master's blood-sucking machine that he uses to drain the human cattle is kind of disgusting as well. This is an important episode though, because even though everything is changed back by the end, we do have a new character, Anya, who will become an integral part of the series as it goes on. Amends is all about characters righting wrongs that they have made. Oz and Willow rekindle their relationship, but Willow rushes things a bit when she tries to sleep with Oz, thinking that's what he would want. But after what Willow did, Oz doesn't just want to be with her because she feels she needs to. Oz wants to take things slow and rebuild that trust. Seeing a girl you love embracing another guy will definitely shatter one's trust, and honestly, Oz is a little too nice and should have distanced himself like Cordelia. Cordelia is definitely done with Xander and goes back to her old ways of mocking the Scoobies. Angel is the one with the most to make amends for. There's flashbacks to people he killed, and he keeps seeing visions of Jenny who tells him the pain will go away if he kills Buffy. Angel decides instead to end his pain by taking his own life in the sunlight. But before he can, Buffy stops him as it was just the first evil messing with Angel's head, trying to get him to kill Buffy or himself. But Angel takes the first snowfall Sunnydale has ever had as a sign that maybe there is still hope for himself to be saved. We also have Buffy trying to patch things up with Faith by inviting her over for Christmas, as she's all alone and has never really had a traditional family holiday. Gingerbread starts with Joyce joining Buffy on a hunt when she comes across 2 dead children. This leads Joyce and other parents banding together to weed out the occult that have infested Sunnydale.
It belongs to the monsters and the witches and the slayers.
There is then a literal witch hunt where the students' lockers are searched and Buffy is forbid from seeing Willow ever again. The dead children tell Joyce to get rid of the bad girls, and Amy, hey, remember her? Willow, and Buffy are all tied to stakes and are set to burn. Gingerbread is all about persecution, going after people or things you don't understand because you believe they are the cause of something violent or horrific. The children never actually existed. They were a demon that liked to watch communities tear themselves apart when faced with something as disturbing as murdered children. A decent episode and the monster looks alright, but it is interesting to see just how quickly the parents of Sunnydale are able to turn on their own kids when a demon tells them to. You'd think more demons would try out this tactic. Helpless sees a drugged Buffy losing her powers and being forced to partake in some weirdo watcher test to see if she's capable of handling herself without them. As the series has progressed, Giles has become more and more of a father figure to Buffy, and when she finds out he was drugging her at the behest of the Watchers Council, it puts a big strain on their relationship. How can Buffy confide in him after he has violated her trust? To make matters worse, Giles tells Buffy what is going on with regards to the test, and because of this, Giles is removed as her watcher. I guess in order to be a watcher, you have to be completely cold and uncaring. How dare you want to see your Slayer succeed and make sure she's okay? The Watchers Council are a bunch of snobby douchebags, and honestly, if I were the Slayer, I would not do a damn thing any of these guys told me. The Zeppo is another Xander-focused episode. In this one, Xander feels kinda left out from the group because he doesn't seem to have much to offer. I mean, Buffy's the Slayer, Willow is getting into magic, and Giles has all of this knowledge of the occult. Xander does have his military knowledge, but that seems to come and go when it's convenient for the plot. To make himself feel a bit more useful, he gets a new car, and ends up getting in a little fender bender with a psychotic bully, and gets dragged into this whole thing with zombies and a plot to blow up the school. What I love about this episode is Xander is on this side quest, while the rest of the main cast are battling this world-ending threat. You get glimpses here and there of whatever this thing is, but it's all basically relegated to the background, while what we're following is really minuscule by comparison. Oh, and Xander and Faith hook up, which is kind of funny because she basically just uses him and throws him out on the streets. Bad Girls introduces us to Buffy's new watcher, Wesley Wyndham Price, who's actually even more stuffy than Giles ever was. His inclusion is a pretty important one because once Angel spins off into his own series, Wesley will be joining him. The episode has Faith and Buffy going on hunts together, with Faith sort of rubbing off on Buffy. Faith isn't one to take orders and can act a bit more aggressively, but this aggressiveness leads to her accidentally killing the deputy mayor thinking he's a vampire. By the end of the episode, Faith is attempting to clean the blood off her clothes, but what I think she's really trying to do is remove the guilt of what she did. She might be a bad girl, but I think deep down she still does have remorse. The mayor also performs some ritual that makes himself unkillable, but the most important aspects of the episode really are the Buffy and Faith interactions. And here's a fun little bit of trivia about the episode. The scene where Buffy and Faith are dancing was used in a sequence for the X-Men Evolution cartoon. The next episode continues where Bad Girls left off with the discovery of the deputy mayor's body. However, Faith has turned on Buffy and told Giles that she was the one responsible for it. Giles quickly sees through it and figures they need to keep up the act so they can keep tabs on Faith. Wesley overhears the conversation and contacts the Watchers Council. Xander and Angel both try to get through to Faith in their own ways, and the Watchers try to bring her back to the Council in Europe. In the end though, the rift between her and Buffy grows even larger, and after killing Trick, Faith heads to the mayor's office where she offers to join him. Faith has potential to do good, but for whatever reason she feels more at home with people who have more unscrupulous intentions. Doppelgangland sees Anya going to Willow so she can use her magic to get Anya's amulet back, only for things to go awry, and instead the alternate vampire version of Willow is brought to this dimension. See, Buffy was doing the whole multiverse thing long before the MCU came on the scene, and yes, I know the comics did it long before Buffy, so don't at me. The great thing about this episode is the fact they called back to this alternate timeline at all. Watching Vampire Willow act all confused because the humans are still walking around, when in her timeline, they all cower and are used as a farmed food source, is a lot of fun. It's also great when Buffy and Xander encounter Vampire Willow, because they have no idea their friend is still alive and that she's not a vampire. The special effects used when normal Willow is confronted by Vampire Willow are pretty well done as well, especially for a show with such a small budget. They used another actress as a stand-in for Vampire Willow's body, and with computers, superimposed Allison's face over it. For something done in the 90s, they did a pretty good job, and if you're not looking for it, you probably wouldn't even notice. There's also a quick little line thrown out after Vampire Willow is locked up, where she says her vampire self might be gay. I believe there were discussions around this time about making one of the main characters gay, but I don't think anything was set in stone. I know a lot of people see this as a foreshadowing for what will come later, but I always thought it was more of a coincidence than anything. But we'll get to all of that when we get to it.
And I think I'm kind of gay.
Enemies has Buffy and Faith working together in order to find the Books of Ascension. However, unbeknownst to Buffy, Faith is working with the mayor and kills the demon holding the books. She also tries seducing Angel so he'll lose his soul. But would Faith sleeping with him really give him true happiness? I feel like he'd have to sleep with someone he truly cares for, unless true happiness is just code speak for orgasm. Faith and the mayor instead call upon a demon to remove Angel's soul, and after that happens, they lead Buffy into a trap. Except the trap is really for Faith so she could spill the beans on what the mayor is up to, and the demon that removed Angel's soul was actually just paying a debt off to Giles. This is a really solid episode that now officially confirms that at least for the time being, Faith is working with the bad guys, and Buffy and her are, as the title suggests, enemies. My favorite part of the episode was the Buffy Angel double cross of Faith. I remember first watching this and thinking, oh god, Angel lost his soul again. But it was a nice little twist at the end that no, he didn't. The whole thing was a ploy to get the villain to run her mouth and expose their entire plan. A little cliche, but it works. On April 20th, 1999, 12th grade students Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold opened fire at Columbine High School where they attended. The teens took the lives of 12 students and one teacher, and eventually their own. The event was one of the most tragic school shootings in US history, and 1 week after the event took place, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode Earshot was set to air. Earshot has Buffy fighting a demon like she normally does, but after being infected by it, suddenly gains the ability to hear people's inner thoughts. This leads to Buffy overhearing someone in the cafeteria saying that by this time tomorrow, I'll kill you all. This new ability becomes too much to bear, so she becomes bedridden, while the Scoobies investigate who could carry out such an act. Cordelia finds a note from Jonathan that says tomorrow everyone will know what he's done. Buffy finds Jonathan in the clock tower with a rifle, except he wasn't going to harm anyone, he wanted to take his own life. Obviously, the similarities between what happened at Columbine and the themes of the episode forced them to push it back. Earshot was going to air the week after on April 27th, but was instead moved to September 21st. Even though it did eventually air, I'm surprised it wasn't pulled altogether. Now, Jonathan never shot anyone, and the killer was actually the lunch lady who was poisoning all the kids. So that may have been a factor for why it wasn't pulled. There was some humor in the episode, like when Buffy discovers that her mother and Giles got busy on the hood of a car. But I'm sure if the producers had known that horrific event was going to happen, then the episode would have been a little more serious. Choices is about the Scooby Gang and what they're gonna do after high school. While it does focus on the mayor's ascension and an evil box that's full of hilarious looking CGI bugs, the real theme is what will happen to their group once school is done. Willow gets kidnapped by the mayor and gets to use some of her magic to defend herself from a vampire. Since she's able to toss around pencils and kill them, why doesn't she do this more often? I honestly think her magic, even at this point, would make a bigger difference than Buffy's Slayer abilities. The group has to make a trade for Willow with the box of bugs, and things don't go that easy. But in Sunnydale, do they ever? The mayor gets his box, the gang gets their Willow, and then Willow decides she's gonna go to the same college as Buffy, despite getting accepted pretty much everywhere. Choices is a decent episode, but it does feel like a bit of a break so we can have some character moments about what they're gonna do post-high school. Of course, Buffy can't leave because she's the Slayer, but they had to give a reason as to why Willow would still be around in season 4, and this is it. Now, most of us have gone to high school prom. Well, I didn't, but I'm sure a lot of you have. It's prom season in Sunnydale, and obviously that means all hell has to break loose. There's some plot with hellhounds, but that really doesn't matter. What truly matters are the character moments. Xander and Anya are going to the prom because she wants to go and knows he enjoys looking at her breasts. Xander discovers Cordelia's family is now broke, and even though they're no longer a thing, he pays for her dress because he still does care. The biggest and most important aspect is Buffy and Angel's relationship. Buffy's mother has a talk with Angel and basically tells him that he can't get in the way of her future. Angel takes this to heart and breaks up with Buffy, telling her he's leaving town after the Ascension. By the end of the episode, he does show up at the prom and the two dance, but it doesn't change what he's going to do. What kind of future could the two really have anyways? He's an immortal vampire who's cursed. The two can never be intimate again, they can't have children, hell, they can't go to the beach. There's a great moment at the end where awards are being given out, class clown, prom king and queen, that sort of thing. When Buffy is given the award for being the class protector. With everything that has gone on the past 3 years, it hasn't gone unnoticed that Buffy has always been there when things have gone to shit. It's actually a pretty touching moment and almost feels like a send-off for the series. It's graduation day, which means it's now time for the mayor's ascension. There's a lot that happens in these 2 episodes. Anya explains to the group that she's witnessed an ascension before, and what they're about to face is unlike anything they've ever seen. When Angel gets shot with a poisoned arrow, the Watchers refuse to help, so Buffy quits. Oz and Willow sleep together for the first time, and Buffy and Faith get into a nasty fight, leading to Faith being put in a coma. In part 2, they find a cure for Angel, which requires him to drink Buffy's blood. Then Buffy is brought to the hospital because she's nearly dead. When Buffy recovers from her injuries, she devises a plan with the group and some newcomers, and this is when things get awesome. At the graduation ceremony, the mayor turns into this giant serpent-like demon. It's a little cheesy and the effects are pretty dated, but what I love about this scene is how the entire class comes packing. It gets even better when Angel shows up with his guys, and the whole thing is just an all-out brawl. The mayor chases Buffy through the school, which is then blown up with explosives by Giles and Buffy. It really feels like an ending to the series, not just the season. Having the whole class take arms against this monster and blowing up the school, which was a character in and of itself, feels like closure. We're ending everything that came before and moving on to a different chapter. It's really obviously symbolic of the change when you're in high school. Everything just feels so much different once you're done. That child you were when you started is no longer there, and what comes next is a mystery. I'm definitely going to be in the minority, but I've always felt this is where the show should have ended. I don't think things ever get as good as this, and it's just diminishing returns as the show goes on. Not to say that it's bad, one of my favorite episodes, if not my favorite episode, is still to come, but there's a different vibe to the show moving forward. Like with Earshot, this episode also came under fire because of the Columbine shootings. After that horrific event, the media was pushing really hard against violence in movies, TV, video games, and music. So just 2 hours before Graduation Day Part 2 would air, it was pulled and replaced with a rerun. This move got a lot of attention and caused quite an uproar. Sarah Michelle Gellar and Seth Green both came out in disagreement with the situation, saying the episode should have been shown in its original time slot. The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, back when it was good, even made a joke at the removal of the episode, with Jon Stewart saying, in addition to postponing the finale, WB executives are considering changing the show's name to Buffy the Vampire Inconveniencer. When the episode finally did release, 2 months later I might add, it was seen by 6.5 million people, which was a higher than normal number for the WB. but in line with the rest of season 3. One place the episode was not delayed in, however, was a little country known as Canada. And because we're so awesome, we actually got to see the episode long before any Americans, which rarely happens. A digital copy of the episode did go around online, and Joss Whedon, who was annoyed by the episode being pulled, told people to bootleg that puppy. Season 3 would also see the departure of some series staples. Angel was leaving for his own show and taking with him Cordelia and Wesley, who were both going to become integral to that series. Without Angel and Cordelia though, Buffy just feels different.
Grr, arg.
Season 4 starts with Buffy beginning college, and like with anyone starting college, it's a bit awkward and can be scary. This is something much different than high school, and there's more expected from you. So I think a lot of people can relate to how Buffy is feeling. Buffy gets an annoying roommate who, if it were me, would probably cause me to Jonathan myself from earshot. She runs into a hunky teaching assistant named Riley, but at least now they're in college and it's no longer much older people hitting on young teenagers anymore. I guess they're still teenagers, but at least they're not 15. I'm looking at you, Angel. Poor Buffy even runs into Pedro Pascal, but luckily he's quickly turned into a vampire and dusted by Buffy, so we don't have to deal with him very much. The most interesting piece to this first episode is that Buffy doesn't appear to be the only one targeting vampires, as a group of guys in military fatigues tase and capture one. Living Conditions continues with Buffy's roommate from hell, Kathy. She even butts her nose in when Buffy is out on patrol. Buffy then begins to have this irrational suspicion that Kathy might be a demon as well, and even begins to have dreams about it. Thankfully, I've never lived in a dorm and never had to deal with an annoying roommate, but I would have staked this woman a long time ago. Kathy starts having the dreams as well, and it all culminates with a confrontation where Buffy discovers that her roommate actually is a demon. Kathy gets dragged to her dimension by her own kind, and then Willow becomes Buffy's new roommate. My favorite part is the very end when Willow bites into a sandwich and Buffy has the same reaction she did with Kathy. No matter how much you're friends with someone, you're always gonna find something that annoys you. The Harsh Day of Light is all about relationships. Buffy is seeing a guy named Parker who she sleeps with, but then acts like he doesn't know her when she sees him out with another woman. Quickly learning that not all guys are Angel. Not every guy has the best of intentions. Anya and Xander also have a confusing relationship, but it's mostly because Anya is only recently mortal and finds the whole feelings thing to be confusing. One of the more interesting things in the episode is the return of Harmony, one of Cordelia's stuck-up friends who is now a vampire, and in a relationship with Spike of all people. I'm wondering if her inclusion was because they didn't have Cordelia anymore. Anyway, she finds the Gem of Amara, which basically removes a vampire's weaknesses, and Spike uses it to fight Buffy in broad daylight. Buffy manages to get the ring off Spike, but like I've said before, there really are a lot of mystical artifacts that grant powers in this show. A good solid episode, and it's just nice to see Spike again. Although Harmony I could do without, and I think Spike agrees. We have ourselves another Halloween-themed episode. In Fear itself, Buffy is all depressed over what happened with Parker, but he's kind of a douchebag and she really could do better. Even though she's upset, the gang manages to convince her to dress up and come to a fun, spooky, haunted house. Just one thing though. Zack, the Black Power Ranger, discovered a mystical symbol and it turns everyone's fears into reality. Anya arrives to the party as the one thing that terrifies her the most, which is bunnies, and once she realizes something is wrong, grabs Giles. Giles then warns Buffy that destroying the symbol will summon a powerful demon. But in one of the funniest twists in the series, the demon is actually super tiny and Buffy just steps on him. This episode sort of harkens back to the season 1 episode Nightmares, which already brought the group's biggest fears to light. This one does it with a fun, spooky Halloween vibe. There's also a funny moment early on when a depressed Buffy attacks a demon, only to discover it's just some poor sap wearing a Halloween mask. Oh, and Giles with the sombrero kills me every time.
Hello, Buffy.
Well, Beer Bad sure is an interesting episode. Often considered one of the worst episodes of the series, if not the worst episode of the series, Beer Bad is basically about the dangers of alcohol and casual sex. Xander becomes a bartender and Buffy starts hanging with some guys drinking beer. However, the more beer they drink, the dumber and dumber they get, until eventually they turn into Neanderthals. While this is happening, Willow is giving Parker hell for what he did to Buffy. At least Buffy knows she has a real friend in Willow who will stand up for her no matter what. We also begin to see signs of a rift between Oz and Willow, as he feels a strange connection to a woman at the Bronze. The episode is very silly and goes out of its way to make it seem like beer is this horrible thing that makes people act really stupid. I mean, it kinda does. I think the message is a little silly and could have been done much better. The one thing I wish they had done though is make Buffy look more like a Neanderthal. They sort of just mess her hair up a bit and leave it at that. It would have been fun to see her with the prosthetics like these guys. I don't think Beer Bad is the worst episode in the series, and I think it's kinda silly fun, if the messages weren't so muddled. Well, Wild at Heart is kinda depressing. It continues the theme that Oz may be attracted to another woman, and I don't really like what they do here. It's weird because Oz is talking to this Veruca chick, and then has Willow sit down and meet her in a very awkward scene. There's nothing wrong with talking to someone you're not seeing, but the way Oz goes about it is so sketchy. One night Oz escapes from his cage, full-on werewolf, and runs into another werewolf, where the next morning, surprise, surprise, it's Veruca. The reason why he was so attracted to her is because he could sense her werewolf side. So with another full moon on the way, he locks her and himself in the cage, and Willow finds them naked the next morning. Oz even tries saying to her that it's not what she thinks. But I mean, come on buddy. Willow nearly creates a revenge spell, but can't do it and is attacked by Veruca. Buffy and Oz save her, but Oz decides to leave town until he can control this other side, effectively ending their relationship. Of all the people to do something like this, Oz would have been the last one I would have guessed. But I would have said the same thing about Willow before her little rendezvous with Xander. Oz was really written off because Seth Green had other obligations and was no longer available for full-time shooting. He will return again, but when he does, it sure gets awkward. The initiative reveals to us who those strange guys are that go around tasing vampires. In the previous episode, Spike was tased and placed inside a cell. Here, vampires and demons are being held so they can be studied and killed. Riley and Buffy's teacher are both involved and have no idea who Buffy really is. Spike escapes from the initiative and finds Willow, where he quickly discovers that he can't attack her. We find out later that he has a chip implanted in his head that makes him feel intense pain whenever he tries to attack a human. Unless he's attacking scientists at the initiative to escape, then it doesn't seem to have any effect. There's a really hilarious moment when Spike realizes he can't hurt Willow, and they talk almost like he's experiencing erectile dysfunction, and it kills me every time.
Doesn't this happen to every vampire?
Not to me, it doesn't.
The initiative also try to take Willow and Spike back with them, but Buffy intervenes, and because they shot some kind of gas, Riley doesn't realize it's her. So by the end of the episode, he's flirting with her, but has no idea she just kicked his ass. Pretty decent episode with some hilarious gags, but I was never really a fan of the whole initiative angle. I don't know how people can call Beer Bad the worst episode in the series when an episode like Pangs exists. The episode takes place around Thanksgiving and is basically about this native spirit that comes back to exact revenge for how his people were treated. I know what they were doing with this one, but my god, do they smack you in the face with its messaging. There's no subtlety to the whole thing, and it's just miserable to watch. The few bright spots all seem to include Spike. Angel returns and is helping from behind the scenes because he doesn't want Buffy to know he's there, when Xander lets it slip that Angel was helping the whole time, and I love the shit-eating grin on Spike's face. There are fun moments throughout, but not enough to make me ever want to go back to this one again. Something Blue has Willow dealing with the fact Oz left and is likely never coming back. After she finds his place empty, she becomes so heartbroken that she casts a spell that will hopefully end her pain. Except this is Buffy, and the spell goes awry, causing Willow to spread misfortune to all those around her. She tells Giles he can't see anything and he goes blind. She tells Buffy if Spike is so important to her that they should get married, and Spike proposes to her, much to the confusion of Giles. Willow also calls Xander a demon magnet, which causes demons to attack him just before he and Anya are about to have a little fun. Willow is then given the chance to become a vengeance demon by the same demon that gave Anya her powers, but thankfully she turns the offer down. Willow puts an end to the spell and all is well. There is one scene where Willow changes Amy back from a rat that has always stood out to me, because later in the series they try to change her back, but claim the magic to do so is beyond the scope of her powers, when she literally does it right here just by saying first she's a perfectly normal girl. So at this point we know Willow has the capabilities and is much stronger than she thinks. The interactions between Buffy and Spike when they're all lovey-dovey is also hilarious, and I'm wondering if this was supposed to be some foreshadowing for later on. Alright, we have made it to what might be my favorite episode in the series. Hush follows the Gentlemen, a demonic group of ghouls who steal the voices from everyone in Sunnydale along with their hearts. Everything about this one is fantastic. The Gentlemen have to be the creepiest monsters to ever appear in the series. It's not just how they look, but also how they act and move. There's this eeriness to how they glide along as they look for potential victims. I love the moment when Giles' girlfriend Olivia sees one go past the window. It's genuinely creepy. An important inclusion in the episode is the introduction of the character Tara. Willow joins a Wiccan group at the school, but is disappointed when she discovers they're more interested in bake sales than they are magic. Well, everyone except for Tara. The two ladies have an interesting exchange when being targeted by the gentleman, and I think we all know what's going on here. They're exchanging long protein strings clearly. If you can think of a better way, I'd like to hear it. What I love about this episode is it has this real fairy tale vibe. Like the gentleman came out of the Brothers Grimm. There's a moment where Buffy has a dream about a little girl singing a nursery rhyme about the gentleman, and it feels like it came straight out of A Nightmare on Elm Street. The gentlemen were played by Charlie Brumbley, Don W. Lewis, Camden Toy, and legendary monster man Doug Jones, known for things like Abe Sapien from Hellboy and the Fawn in Pan's Labyrinth. Pinhead from the Hellraiser series, and surprisingly Mr. Burns from The Simpsons were used when it came to designing the gentleman. They also have their little straitjacket wearing minions that flail around, and I don't know why, but they remind me of the putties from Power Rangers. From a storyline standpoint, this episode is also important because it allows Buffy and Riley to discover who each other really are. So by the end, there are no more secrets. I could go on and on about how awesome Hush is, but it's something you really need to see. Overall, Doomed is pretty standard stuff, with Buffy not sure if she can be with Riley because she's been hurt before. But by the end, they're all making out, so I guess they'll make it work. I never really liked Riley, I always found him to be pretty dull, but what saves the episode is Spike. Spike is always entertaining when he's on screen. The fact that Spike has to stay with Xander in his parents' basement with a leaky pipe is pretty damn funny. I also love the joy he gets when he realizes he might not be able to hurt humans, but he sure as hell can hurt demons. A New Man is a fun episode as it has Giles turn into a demon, and because no one knows it's him, it leads to some hijinks. While looking for a demonic threat, Giles runs into Ethan again, and instead of kicking his ass, Ethan wants to talk to him because he has some information about the initiative. After everything Ethan has done, I don't know why Giles would listen to a thing he has to say. Instead, Ethan and Giles go out for drinks and learns that the initiative are up to something, and are harboring a secret called 314. The next morning, Giles wakes up and notices he's now a demon. The great thing about this is Giles tries to speak to his friends, and all they hear is demonic growls and snarls. But Spike, of all people, understands him, because he just so happens to be able to speak the same demonic language. Eventually, Giles is freed from his curse, and Ethan is taken to the initiative to undergo therapy. As much of a creep as Ethan is, though, he wasn't entirely lying when we do see a room 314 at the initiative, which is going to lead us to the very worst big bad in the entire series. The Iron Team has Buffy learning more about the initiative and even being brought down into the facility with Riley. However, because Buffy knows a little more than she should, her professor, Maggie Walsh, tries to have her killed because they see Buffy as a threat to their plan. And what is their plan? A stupid Frankenstein creation named Adam that is just an amalgamation of a bunch of demons and monsters that Buffy has already fought. Adam is really dumb. Plus, we already did the whole Frankenstein creation, so he's also really unoriginal. Willow and Tara also continue on with their budding relationship, and Spike does whatever he can to avoid the initiative, who are tracking him down with a tracking device. The episode is okay, but I really don't like the initiative stuff. I hate Adam, and Season 4 as a whole is a big step down from Season 3. Also, I'm just getting tired of saying the words the initiative. Goodbye Iowa progresses the boring main storyline, with Adam escaping the initiative and killing a young boy at the park. The episode really starts to drive home the whole Frankenstein comparison, especially with regards to the little boy Adam kills. While in Frankenstein, the monster kills a little girl because he thinks she'll float when he throws her in the water, here Adam straight up skewers the boy because he's just evil, I guess. There's also some infighting with the initiative because they think Buffy killed Walsh, while Riley says there's no way she would do anything like that. We also come to find that the soldiers have secretly been given drugs, and Buffy is no match for Adam. It's hard for me to really show any enthusiasm for what's going on because I simply don't care. This year's Girl almost feels like a Season 3 episode. We have the return of Faith, which is nice to see. She finds out the mayor's dead and she's been in a coma for 8 months. Faith confronts Buffy and Willow before police arrive and she runs off. Faith then finds a tape from the mayor and a little device that will help her get back at Buffy. Faith takes Joyce hostage and forces Buffy to fight her. The two women fight and Faith uses her device to switch bodies with Buffy, pulling off the classic Captain Ginyu body swap. This year's girl is mostly a setup for the next episode, and what I love about this one is that it barely has anything to do with the initiative. There's some mentions here and there, but for the most part this is a standalone 2-part arc that was sorely needed in what is a pretty dull season. Who Are You continues where we left off with Faith now in the body of Buffy and Buffy being carted off by the police. Buffy's trip to the Slammer doesn't last long and she's kidnapped by the Watchers. While that's happening, Faith is living out Buffy's life, but out of everyone she interacts with, it's actually Tara who realizes it isn't really Buffy. Faith sleeps with Riley, which is kind of weird because he can sense something is off, but still goes through with it anyways. Willow and Tara perform a spell to locate the real Buffy in a scene that is dripping in sexual tension. Buffy escapes the Watchers and goes to Giles' house, where she's handed a Green Lantern power ring from Willow and Tara, which should switch them back. Buffy finds Faith and the two women are once again put back into their proper bodies. Buffy then learns from Riley that he slept with Faith, and Buffy gets angry at him for it. But he slept with Buffy. She may have seemed a bit off, but how was he supposed to know it wasn't her? The same sort of thing happened in the latest terrible season of The Boys, where Huey sleeps with a shapeshifter thinking it's his girlfriend, and then somehow she gets all upset at him. Like, how the hell is that his fault? He's the victim. Besides that bit of weird writing, the 2-parter is a breath of fresh air for what has been largely a forgettable season. Superstar is a fun light episode which I think was needed after the few we just had. Remember the little guy Jonathan? Well, all of a sudden he's this super suave hero who can do everything and who everyone adores. It's a fun change of pace, and it's interesting that out of all the characters they have available, they choose the one background nerdy guy who was always being picked on in high school. It would make sense that a guy who was never popular would want to suddenly become the center of attention, but I was never popular and I still don't want attention. It's soon revealed that Jonathan cast a spell that would make everyone love him, and because of this, it summons a demon. The only way to reverse the spell is if the demon dies, which of course by the end it does, and Jonathan goes back to being unimportant yet again. One of the things I like the most about the episode is the change in the intro to the show. They added random shots of Jonathan throughout to make it seem like he's one of the main characters, but what I think they should have done if they really wanted to go the whole way was change the title of the show to Jonathan the Vampire Slayer, or just call it Jonathan. Sadly, I think this might confuse people and cause them to turn the channel, which is likely why it never happened. This is a fun episode, but when digging through reviews of it on IMDb, I found one that I'm pretty sure was written by the comic book guy from The Simpsons. Worst episode ever. The show is of course a total fiction of Slayer, vampires, and other demons. This show is not about one guy's delusions of grandeur. This was far too unrealistic and doesn't follow regular flow of the rest of the show. I was so bored. Reading this, all I can think of is the lyrics to Mystery Science Theater 3000. Just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. Where the Wild Things Are is a very weird episode. Another one that I think would probably be on a worst of list. It has Buffy and Riley getting all hot and heavy quite frequently, and a haunted house that basically makes you orgasm if you touch it. It's very weird, but the house the soldiers from the initiative now live in is haunted by children that were abused by some Christian fundamentalist or something. If these wayward teens even showed the slightest bit of interest in sex, the girls had their hair cut off and the boys were aggressively baptized. Even weirder is all this comes to the forefront because Riley and Buffy's romps in the hay awakened these ghosts with their sexual energy. I don't know, man, this one just does not do it for me. There's some fun stuff, like always. The argument between Anya and Xander in the ice cream truck about not having enough sex, and then turning around to see the parents and children staring at them, is pretty funny. But the episode overall is a real dud. The best part, in my opinion, is when Giles is singing Behind Blue Eyes, much to the confusion of the Scoobies. But anytime you can get Anthony Stewart Head singing, I say do it. That guy has a great voice, and he was the best part of Repo the Genetic Opera, as much as that movie sucks. I just wish there was a full-length version of the song available. I know he did a full-length version, but it doesn't sound nearly as good as the one he does here. Hey, remember when I said things would get awkward when Oz returned? Welcome to New Moon Rising. Obviously, as soon as he shows his face, things are immediately awkward. But I don't know how the group doesn't pick up right away that there might be something with Willow and Tara. Oz shows Willow that he has full control of his inner wolf, and tells her that he spoke with Xander, who said she doesn't have a new guy. Which is accurate, she doesn't have a new guy. This is when Willow comes out to Buffy that she likes Tara, which I think is handled as well as it could be. Buffy acts a little awkward, but for the most part, she's still supportive of her friend. Things get interesting when Oz speaks to Tara, and he figures out what's going on. This causes his emotions to go wild, and he spontaneously turns into the werewolf, which could be a good power to have if utilized properly. The initiative capture Werewolf Oz, and then it's up to the Scoobies to break him free. Oz is broken free, and he and Willow are given their chances to say their goodbyes. This episode is much more character and drama driven than the others, and I think the subject matter is handled pretty well. The Yoko Factor tries to remind the audience that Spike is supposed to be a bad guy by having him align himself with that dork Adam. Spike then starts to separate the Scoobies. He convinces Giles no one needs him anymore, so he starts drinking. Spike tells Xander that he's useless and should join the army. So Xander tells Riley all about Angel, who Buffy was just with on the spin-off show. Riley then finds Angel fighting some of the soldiers, and those two start fighting. There's a lot of infighting within the group, and their bond is stretched really thin, which is all part of the plan because a weakened Scooby gang makes them easier to pick off one by one. Buffy ends the conversation saying she can handle Adam without them because she already has someone backing her up, but her backup Riley may or may not be working with Adam. The Yoko Factor is a fine episode, but the most important aspect is it gets Giles singing once again. Xander and Giles also learn about Tara and Willow being in a relationship in one of the funniest scenes in the series.
Just left me in the basement to Tara's your girlfriend?
Bloody hell.
But all I can say is thank God we are in the endgame of this season, because this has been rough. Primeval might not be the last episode of the season, but oddly enough, it's the conclusion to the Adam storyline. Usually, you want your last episode to be the big conclusion, but for whatever reason, they thought it would be better to save something completely different for the last episode. In Primeval, we learn Riley is with Adam not because of his own free will, but because of a chip that had been implanted in his chest, which gives Adam total control over him. They're going to create human, demon, cyborg hybrids, and need Buffy to kill the demons held at the initiative so the parts can be used to create an army. Why Adam doesn't just kill the demons himself, since he's supposed to be so much more powerful, I have no idea. The Scoobies kiss and make up and head inside the initiative lab, where they're caught. Buffy tries explaining Project 314 and Adam, but no one believes her until all hell breaks loose. And then Buffy has to kick and punch the bad guy using the power of friendship. When you compare this to the confrontations with the first three big bads, it's kind of meh. Considering how powerful Buffy is here with her friend's powers, it makes you wonder why they don't just do this with every new big bad moving forward. I know they say the magic is dangerous, but it doesn't really seem to do any harm, and a god like Buffy might be kinda useful in the future. Primeval is fine, but it feels kinda run-of-the-mill, which can be said for most of Season 4. Restless is one of the most unique episodes of the series, and one that I'm still not quite sure what to make of it. After the battle with Adam, the gang all go back to Buffy's house, where they proceed to fall asleep with each person having strange and bizarre dreams, each one experiencing things they went through in the past, or hints towards things that are yet to come. At the end of each dream, the first Slayer attacks and kills each person. Luckily, this doesn't follow Nightmare on Elm Street rules. Buffy encounters the first Slayer as well, who tells her she has to fight alone, which Buffy ignores, then everyone wakes up. When the group all came together with the spell to fight Adam, they tapped into the first Slayer's power, which is what caused them all to experience these intense dreams. But it's also abstract that I never really know what the hell is going on. I will say it is interesting, the way the dreams are shot, the angles used, and how they can go from one set to another so seamlessly. It really is fascinating, though not really something that is my cup of tea. I will give this episode props for allowing Giles to sing once again, and using his singing to give out exposition was a really great idea and hilarious.
I'm trying not to bleed on my couch, I just had it steam cleaned.
Also, it's pretty funny that Xander dreams about having a threesome with Willow and Tara, and also hooking up with Buffy's mom. Not even Buffy herself, but her mom. Restless is a unique episode, but I'm not sure if it was the best way to cap off Season 4. With Season 4 complete, it was a no-brainer that there would be a Season 5. Buffy was one of the WB's highest rated shows, and there was no way they'd give it up. Just yet anyways.
Grr, arg.
The Season 5 opener, Buffy vs. Dracula, completes the Universal Monster homages, and if it wasn't for the Count himself appearing, we could have just counted any generic vampire as his stand-in, but Buffy decided to go all the way with this one and have the Prince of Darkness himself involved. As the title suggests, Dracula moves into Sunnydale in a not-so-secret castle. He meets with Buffy, who becomes a little starstruck, and then takes Xander under his control, who will act as the episode's Renfield, complete with bug eating. In classic Dracula fashion, he hypnotizes Buffy and drinks some of her blood. Later, he hypnotizes her again and forces Buffy to feed off him. It's fun seeing Dracula go toe-to-toe with Buffy, but I always felt like they treated him like kind of a joke. You have the most well-known vampire of all time, and you just have him in a one-off showdown? At least they keep him unkillable because we all know Dracula always finds a way to come back. One of the funny things about the casting for Dracula was the actor that played him was also cast in a TV movie called Dark Prince: The True Story of Dracula, which came out a month after this episode, and he looks exactly the same. I would love to know which project he got involved with first, and if either knew he was playing Dracula in both. The Dracula stuff is often overlooked though, because something even more terrifying happens when the show introduces Dawn, a sister that Buffy suddenly has, and we the audience are just finding out about. This was a really risky move because anytime a show suddenly adds a new kid to the cast, it usually meant the show was on its last legs. After the ending of Buffy vs. Dracula, fans were confused. Who the hell was this kid and where did she come from? There was no explanation. Not even a line that may be saying she was living with Buffy's father and wanted to come live with her mom and sister. It was confusing as hell for the audience. 14-year-old Michelle Trachtenberg was cast as the young Dawn Summers, and being a huge fan of the series, she was really excited. However, the role was originally written with Dawn being 12 years old. So after hiring a 14-year-old, they had to age up Dawn in the scripts to reflect it. Otherwise, the way she acted and talked wouldn't have made much sense. Dawn's first real episode, Real Me, already gives hints that there's something up with Dawn, that she might be more than just Buffy's little sister. The episode is fairly straightforward and simple, with Dawn being kidnapped by Harmony and her inept gang of vampires and Buffy coming to the rescue. There's some little moments here and there about Dawn not fitting in with Buffy and her friends, but there's a reason for that. Oh, and Giles buys the magic shop after the owner was killed, and this basically becomes the new library, where the gang hangs out and discusses whatever new threat is on the horizon. The Replacement is another fun Xander-focused episode, and so far I don't think there's been a dud when he's been the focal point. This is another doppelganger-esque episode, except the twist here is that the two Xanders in the episode are the same person, just with different qualities. One Xander is the silly, schlubby Xander who likes to joke around and screws up, while the other Xander is more mature and has his life together. What separates the two Xanders is a chance encounter with this neat demon that looks like it's made of lava, and after it blasts Xander with its little doohickey, he gets separated. We then spend the majority of the episode following Schlubby Xander as he tries to convince everyone that he's the real Xander. A fun episode with some good comedic moments. There's a bit near the end where Anya says they should wait to put the Xanders back together because they should all have sex first, and Giles just looks back like, what the f***? Anya isn't the best with social cues, having been a vengeance demon for so long, but it leads to some very funny moments. There's also a little bit where Riley is talking with Xander, and he tells him he loves Buffy, but she doesn't love him. During season 4, and we'll see in season 5, that Riley feels inadequate, and like he doesn't deserve Buffy because he's not superpowered, and she's stronger than him. And this will definitely come into play more as the season progresses. Out of My Mind has a lot going on. First off, Riley's feelings of inadequacy continue and nearly kills him as he's basically taking steroids so he can stay on equal footing with Buffy. Joyce questions who Dawn is, then collapses to the floor, adding more mystery to what's really going on with Dawn and now Joyce's health. Then you have the beginnings of Tara worrying about Willow's use of magic when practical means are just fine, which will become a large focal point in the future. And lastly, there's Spike, who's having dreams about kissing Buffy, leaving him terrified at the thought that he might actually be having feelings for her. But can a demon truly have feelings for someone? It took a soul for Angel to love Buffy, and as soon as that was gone, he was full-on monster. So is what Spike feeling actually what he thinks it is? There is a lot of little plot threads that are interwoven in the episode, but what it really comes down to is Riley's health and dismissal from the initiative. A fine episode that doesn't do a whole lot, but mostly here to set up things that will take place down the road. No Place Like Home is the episode that really kickstarts the season. We meet the season's big bad Glorificus, or Glory for short, which we'll be sticking with because it's much easier for me to say. Glory is looking for a key, and as Buffy discovers from a monk, the key is actually her sister Dawn, and was sent to her for protection. Everything including their memories were created by the monks, but she is very much human. This is interesting because everything she knows now is both real and not real. When Buffy performs a ritual Anya recommended to see if her house is affected by magic in any way, she notices everything dealing with Dawn seems to fade in and out. It's almost like two separate universes have converged into one. Throughout the episode, there are also more of Riley's insecurities, and more mentally ill people showing up in the hospital that claim to see things that Buffy cannot. There's also an intern at the hospital named Ben, but more on him later. I also want to quickly add the Dagon sphere that Buffy finds in the beginning of the episode. It's a tool for protection from which that cannot be named, and as a big H.P. Lovecraft fan, I always enjoy when they throw in nods from his short stories. Family is the first Tara-focused episode of the series and has her family come to take her away before she becomes a demon. Since it's gonna be her 20th birthday, Buffy and Xander try to think of a gift to get her, but don't really know her well enough and can't think of anything. This leads to Giles calling them stupid because they're in a magic shop and can't think of anything to get her. Tara's brother, father, and cousin all come into town, and they all tell her that she needs to come with them because she's a demon, and she wouldn't want her friends to find out. So Tara casts a spell so they won't see her demon side. But all that leads to is a bunch of Glory's demons that are sent to kill Buffy are now invisible. What family really boils down to is sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. It's sad to say, but oftentimes the family you create becomes your real family. And this is the case with Tara. As you find out at the end, Tara actually isn't a demon at all. And it was basically a lie told to all the women in the family to keep them in line. My favorite part is this is all revealed because Spike straight up punches Tara in the face and the chip in his brain goes off, proving she is 100% human. It's a good episode and gives more character to Tara, who for the most part her time so far has been kinda mousy and quiet, but now she's really accepted by everyone. Fool for Love is a Spike-centered episode that gives us more insight into how he became the Spike we know today. After Buffy is nearly killed by a normal everyday vampire, she speaks to Spike to learn how he managed to kill two Slayers. Spike started off as a quiet guy who wrote bad poetry and got rejected by women before being turned into a vampire by Drusilla. After that, his attitude took a 180-degree turn. The first Slayer was in China, but seeing her moves with that sword, it really makes you wonder how Spike even stood a chance. Look, I love Buffy like everyone else, but she doesn't have the skills this young lady has. The second Slayer was in New York in the 70s, and I would have killed for a young Pam Grier in this role. This kill in particular is really going to come back and haunt Spike in Season 7. Spike then moves in for a kiss but is rejected, so he does the sensible thing and grabs a shotgun to put an end to Buffy. Except he finds Buffy crying because her mother is staying at the hospital for a CAT scan as her health is starting to worsen. So he decides not to go through with it. One of the more interesting things is when Spike moves in to kiss Buffy, she rejects him, but does make it seem like there is a hint of interest there. All in all, this is a good episode, and anytime I can get more Spike on my screen is a good time. Shadow begins with Buffy's mother going in for a CAT scan, where it's revealed they find a shadow on her brain, which turns out to be a brain tumor, which is hard enough for anyone to deal with. On top of this, Glory is also looking for the key, and summons a goofy snake monster to find it. The snake monster looks pretty cool when it's practical, but when it's CGI, it looks pretty rough. There's an interesting moment when the group is trying to figure out who or what Glory is, when Glory literally comes into the magic shop to buy ingredients needed for her snake monster. Luckily for the Scoobies, she didn't know who they were, otherwise things would have ended a lot differently. Riley is also letting his insecurities get the better of him, because Spike seemed to know about Buffy's mom and he didn't. Dawn tells him that Buffy doesn't get as emotional about him when compared to Angel, and Buffy sort of leaves him so she can be with her family. A lot of what Riley is dealing with is really in his own head. I don't think there really is an issue with the relationship, I just don't think he's used to being with someone where the roles of power are reversed. Often guys are the stronger one in the relationship, but because he isn't, he doesn't know how to react. He feels useless. Riley makes things worse for himself when he goes to Willie's place and willingly allows a vampire to feed on him in some bizarre fetish. I don't know exactly what it does for him, but it's kinda weird. In listening to Fear, Joy starts having more and more strange outbursts because of her tumor, and after speaking to the doctor, Buffy is allowed to bring Joyce home before her surgery. In the meantime, a strange demon has fallen from space, and it kinda looks like Belial from Basket Case with a cockroach thorax, a very strange design. The monster targets the mentally ill, and because of Joyce's condition, comes for her. But why does it make seagull noises?
Stop staring at me, I don't like it.
Buffy kills the thing with the help of Spike, and Riley comes in right as Spike is helping her up, which only adds more fuel to how Riley thinks Buffy sees him. There's an interesting moment near the end when Joyce reveals that she knows Dawn isn't really her daughter, but tells Buffy that no matter what happens, she wants her to take care of Dawn. Riley is also letting more and more vampires feed on him because I guess it's the only thing that gives him any kind of feeling, considering he doesn't think Buffy cares about him. Which again, I think is something that he's built up in his own head. Buffy's kind of dealing with some serious things at the moment, and if she comes off as distant, well, I don't think it's really intentional. Lastly, we learn that Ben is actually the one who summoned the demon, because he's trying to clean up Glory's mess. This will have much more meaning later on in the season. Well, Into the Woods sure is an episode. Joyce has her surgery and it's deemed a success, which takes a huge weight off Buffy's shoulders. However, the crux of the episode is Riley and how he's been feeling. Riley and Buffy share a night of passion after she gets the good news, but once she's asleep, Riley sneaks off for some more vampire fun. Spike catches him and takes Buffy to a vampire den where humans willingly allow vampires to feed on them so they can get some kind of high. Obviously, she doesn't take this well, but then Riley attempts to take it out on Spike. This was his own doing. He chose to both cheat, because it definitely comes off as a sexual thing, and become this vampire-loving druggie. But still, somehow, he thinks she's the issue. Riley speaks with Buffy and explains that he felt like the vampires had a hunger for him that she doesn't, completely ignoring the fact that she's dealing with a god and her unwell mother. Riley then gives her an ultimatum that he's been given an opportunity to join a demon hunting group with the government, and unless she gives him a reason to stay by that night, well, he's leaving. He gives her no time to make this decision, when he's never even told her how he's been feeling. Not once did he talk about what was going on. To make things worse, Xander takes his side and makes it seem like Buffy is the one in the wrong. Xander even calls Riley a once-in-a-lifetime guy, but once-in-a-lifetime guys don't get their blood sucked at vampire dens. Fortunately, Buffy doesn't make it in time, and Riley leaves with his new team. Riley really became unlikable as time went on. He started off as a fairly generic nice guy, but because he couldn't handle the power dynamic between himself and Buffy, he decided to go home. He never once spoke to her about how he felt. He just let everything fester inside, then went on some weird cheating drug binge with vampires. Even Xander doesn't look good in this one. Riley told Xander Buffy didn't love him, and as Buffy's friend, he should have told Riley to talk to her about it. This episode is kind of annoying, but I'm not sad to see Riley go. Triangle is a more lighthearted episode that puts Xander between an arguing Willow and Anya, who both want him to take their side. Giles has gone away for a bit and has put Anya in charge of the store. However, she doesn't appreciate that Willow is using inventory without paying. So the two ladies want Xander to choose his side, but what ends up happening instead is they summon a large troll with a large hammer. This episode is pretty silly, but I like the little interactions between Anya and Willow. The interesting thing about the troll is he was with Anya at one time and was the reason why she became a vengeance demon in the first place, but we'll learn more about that in a future episode. There's also a little side plot where Buffy is all upset because she thinks Anya and Xander have this perfect relationship, and she doesn't. And at one point the troll says they won't last, which upsets Buffy even further and maybe a bit of foreshadowing. The end of the episode has Dawn overhearing Buffy, Giles, and her mother talking about her being the key. Though she doesn't hear the entire conversation, she knows there's something going on that may put her in danger. This obviously is going to explode later in the season, but we're at the halfway point, so things need to start unraveling. Checkpoint begins the ramp-up process of the season, and as those lovable scamps, the Watchers Council return so they can test Buffy and see if she's fit to take on Glory. They also threaten to close the magic shop and deport Giles if she fails. But since when do they have authority over Giles owning a store? Like, go f*** yourselves. Glory comes to Buffy's home to threaten her and her family unless Buffy hands her the key, completely unaware she's looking right at it. Because of this, Buffy sends her mother and sister to Spike for protection, but as much as I like Spike, I don't know how much protection he can really offer against a god. With all the monsters they've defeated over the years, they must have some super powerful relics stashed away somewhere. Buffy then gets assaulted by the Knights of Byzantium, a weirdo group of cosplayers whose only goal is to destroy the key before Glory can get her hands on it. The best part of the episode is when Buffy tells the Watchers Council to kiss her ass and forces them to reinstate Giles. Realistically, she's the Slayer, and she's the one who carries all the power, so I don't know why these uptight clowns think they have control over her. They reluctantly agree and inform Buffy that Glory isn't a demon, but she's a god. Demon, god, I think Buffy will be just fine. Blood Ties has Dawn finally learning the truth about who or what she really is. There's a bit in the beginning where Buffy and Giles tell the others all about Dawn, and they act all offended like they should have known from the beginning. But the more people that know, the easier it is for Glory to find out. So I think keeping them in the dark was the best choice. Anyways, Dawn notices everyone is acting weird around her, and after seeing Giles awkwardly put a book away, she comes back to the magic shop with Spike and finally discovers what she is. Since Dawn's arrival, perceived mentally ill people have been calling Dawn out, claiming they see what she is. So Dawn decides to use this and go to the hospital's mental ward to see if she can learn more. She runs into Ben and tells him she's the key, and then Ben turns into Glory. Glory and Ben are one and the same, but luckily for everyone, they don't seem to have the same memories. So Glory just thinks Buffy's annoying little sister is there and not the key. Dawn's memory is also distorted from the encounter because she remembers Ben and Glory, but not how Glory got there and how Ben disappeared. It's a little convenient that she would have this mild bout of amnesia, otherwise they'd be able to go after Ben, who doesn't seem to be nearly as powerful. Crush is all about Spike and his poor love life. First he has little Dawn who has a crush on him, but unlike a certain other vampire, Spike prefers ladies a bit older. Spike has a crush on Buffy, who may or may not have a thing for him. He's with Harmony, but she's so grating that the only time he can even get the wee bit excited is when she pretends she's Buffy. And then he has a returned Drusilla, who's come to mess with his head because she's insane. Spike tosses Harmony to the side because he really only uses her when he's got nothing else going on, and she's so dim-witted that she can't really see it. Drusilla is kind of a bad influence on Spike, because even with his chip, she still convinces him to feed on a human, which I'm sure caused a lot of pain, but proves he could still go after Buffy if he wanted to. Spike also has a shrine dedicated to Buffy, which is a perfectly normal thing to do when you like someone. The whole thing culminates with a brawl and Spike losing not one woman, but all three. Buffy even places a spell on her house, so Spike is no longer welcome. I want to feel bad for Spike, but he really is his own worst enemy. I Was Made to Love You is another love robot gone awry. Not nearly as fun as Ted, April is a robot looking for her boyfriend Warren, a technological genius who's going to become quite the pain in the ass in season 6. Warren created this robot to love him, but eventually got bored and left her, so now she's asking everyone in Sunnydale where Warren is, and getting very aggressive with anyone that gets in her way, especially Warren's current girlfriend, and Buffy, who she sees as a threat. The episode is alright, but it feels like it's used more to get Buffy to realize that maybe she doesn't need love right at this moment, causing her to cancel a date with Ben, and good thing she does because she has no idea who he really is. The most shocking part of the episode, and the thing that basically overshadows everything else, is what happens when Buffy returns home. The Body might be one of the best hours of television ever produced. I really can't understate how good this episode is, and I feel like you could take a non-Buffy fan, show them this episode, and they would break down in tears. From the moment Buffy returns home and finds her mother lying there motionless, what's so heartbreaking is here Buffy is, the Slayer, the Protector. She can fight demons, she can fight vampires, she can fight gods from other dimensions, but something as mundane like a brain aneurysm, and she's completely helpless. It's so hard to see Buffy deal with her mother's passing, and when she calls her mother Mommy again, reverting back to the little girl, if it doesn't choke you up, then I don't know what will.
Mommy?
There are little moments throughout that will add to the drama. The lack of music, Buffy breaking her mother's rib while performing CPR, Buffy fixing her skirt before the medics arrive, how the camera doesn't show the medic's face clearly, as if we're just staring right through them. It's a lot to take in. When Dawn finds out what happened while at school, it's equally as sad. The fact the walls in her class are all just windows, so her friends can watch as she breaks down, kills me. The shock that everyone goes through when they find out is surreal. And it's interesting how Anya reacts, because she doesn't seem to understand the concept of death. It's like trying to explain to a child why their grandparent won't be coming back. There's a nice quiet moment between Tara and Buffy, where Tara shares her experience of losing her own mother. The two ladies were never the closest, but I think this was a turning point for the relationship. The ending where Buffy has to save her sister from a vampire, and then seeing their mother's body is quite the shock as well. Buffy's used to fighting the undead, but now there is her mother, just lying, cold and gone. It's an interesting contrast between the silliness of the show and the real impact of what just happened. I could really go on and on about this episode, but it's just so good and needs to be seen even by non-Buffy fans. Forever picks up where the body left off, with the Summers girls picking out caskets and preparing for the funeral. After the funeral, Buffy is met by Angel, who's come to comfort and assure Buffy that none of this was her fault. There was nothing she could have done to protect her mother. They share an intimate moment, but Buffy pushes him back before things can get any further. She's appreciative of what he did and how he comforted her, but it's best he leaves. In the meantime, Dawn is trying to put together a resurrection spell to bring her mother back. Tara and Willow refuse to help because of what the implications could be, which is kind of funny considering what happens in season 6. Dawn enlists the help of Spike, who hesitates because I think even for an evil vampire, he knows this isn't right. Buffy is warned about what Dawn is doing, but by the time she finds her, it's already too late. Dawn performed the spell and someone has come home. But before Buffy can open the door, Dawn tears the photo of their mother and there's suddenly no one there. Forever is kind of typical Buffy for the most part. However, it's the ending where the two sisters really come to grip with what's taken place and are finally able to grieve. There's no magic or monsters, just two sisters comforting one another after the loss of their mother. It's also pretty heartbreaking to see how excited Buffy is to answer the door, even though she was against the idea of bringing her mother back. As wrong as it is, she still wanted to see her. A sad episode, but not nearly as good as the body. With everything that has gone on, Buffy fears that the more she becomes the Slayer, she'll lose more and more of her humanity. So she decides to go on a vision quest where the first Slayer tells Buffy that her gift is death. This obviously confuses Buffy because how can death be a gift? Especially considering what she just went through with her mother. On the wackier side of things, Spike has a Buffy robot built by Warren that he uses for various deeds, much to the disgust of the Scoobies and Buffy herself, who finds it revolting. Spike is also captured by Glory and tortured because she's trying to discover where the key is, but Spike won't say a damn thing. By the end, Buffy pretends to be the Buffy bot and asks Spike why he didn't tell Glory, which leads to Buffy realizing that Spike might actually have her best interest at heart and gives him a kiss. Intervention is a good look at Spike's evolving character, but I would like to point out that if Buffy didn't go around telling everyone about Dawn, then this entire situation likely wouldn't have happened. Sometimes it really is better to keep things close to the chest. Tough Love starts to bring Tara's concern about Willow's magic usage to the surface. She's been vocal about it in the past, but she's starting to see Willow become more and more reliant on it. This leads to the couple's first big fight, and Tara heading to the fair alone, where the two women were supposed to spend the day. Instead, Tara runs into Glory, who basically threatens to kill everyone around unless Tara tells her who the key is. Tara doesn't say a thing, and Glory uses her little brain drain, which is why there has been an uptick in mentally unwell people in Sunnydale. When Willow finds Tara, she's too late, so a pissed off Willow grabs some magic so she can lay the smack down on Glory. You know, I'd love to see a dark Willow against Glory. Now that would be interesting. Willow gets a few good licks in, but the power is too much for her to handle, and she's rescued by Buffy. Tara, Willow, Buffy, and Dawn then have one last meal together in Tara's dorm room, because from here on out, things will never be the same. With Glory now knowing Dawn is the key, the gang has to do whatever they can to protect her. There's a funny scene where Buffy carries an injured Dawn, and the stunt woman hides her face behind what is obviously a doll. Since they have to flee from Glory, they decide to take a trip in an aluminum foil wrapped Winnebago driven by Spike, much to the displeasure of Giles. They get attacked by the Knights of Byzantium, which really does sound like a brand of toothpaste, and have to hole up in a gas station where Willow casts a protective spell. Buffy calls up Ben to help with an injured Giles, but I'm surprised the Knights don't know he's Glory. Things go exactly how you think they will, and Glory takes Dawn, leaving Buffy in utter shambles because she just lost her mother and now her sister is gone too. Spiral is a good episode that is really all about setting up the endgame. Because of what happened in the previous episode, Buffy is now in a catatonic state, and because of this, it's up to the Scoobies to come up with a plan. I understand losing your mother and having your fake sister stolen, but this might be the worst time to lose it. Luckily, Buffy has a good support structure, and Willow manages to snap her out of it. I don't think Buffy would be nearly as successful if it weren't for her friends. The Watchers Council looks down on the Slayer for having friends or people she can rely on, and this is probably why previous Slayers didn't last nearly as long. Buffy learns that Ben is Glory, and even worse, the only thing that can stop Glory from opening a portal to her dimension is killing Dawn. So big things are at stake. Hey, remember when the first Slayer told Buffy her gift was death? Well, that sure comes into play. The episode opens with a montage of the entire series because at the time, there was talks that this could be the very end of the show, so they wanted to give the series a nice send-off. With the ritual about to take place, Buffy absolutely refuses to let Dawn die, so their plan is to smack Glory around with the troll hammer and use that daggone sphere until the time runs out and Glory can no longer perform her ritual. But once the time passes, wouldn't Glory just kill everyone anyways? Xander proposes to Anya, who tells him to wait until after the fight with Glory, because she wants to make sure he's not just doing this because the world might end. The group start their assault on Glory, and remember that daggone sphere that was supposed to repel her? Well, it barely does anything and she destroys it. There's a great moment where after Buffy whoops Glory, she turns back into Ben, and Buffy lets him go, telling him Glory can never return. Well, Giles isn't nearly as forgiving as Buffy and straight up smothers him to death. Giles doesn't play around. Dawn gets sliced open before Buffy can save her, and the portal begins to open, letting in terrible CGI dragons. This is when Buffy realizes her gift of death might actually mean her own death, so she sacrifices herself, closing the portal and effectively ending the series. After season 5 wrapped up, there was worry that the show would not return. Buffy was dead and she was going to stay dead. Not because the cast and crew wanted everything to end, but because the WB, for one reason or another, didn't want to pay for the show anymore. The story differs depending on who you listen to, but Joss claimed WB wanted to slash budgets, including salaries, and Joss wasn't willing to budge. But the Buffy the Vampire Slayer's ratings never dropped, and the show was as popular as ever, so attacking your most loyal show and fan base was a really odd decision by WB, especially considering that Buffy basically made them a household name. When everything looked like this was the end, a burgeoning network called UPN came in and saved the day, picking up the rights to the show and ensuring that Buffy's story would continue.
Grr, arg.
Buffy died, but Tuesday on UPN, she lives.
When Buffy the Vampire Slayer was picked up by UPN, they really wanted to drive home that she was back and she's alive. UPN went all out with their advertising, and on October 2nd, 2001, Buffy returned in a 2-hour event that would kickstart season 6. With Buffy dead, the Scoobies, with an ever-increasing in power Willow, take over the slaying duties. They use the Buffy bot so as not to arouse suspicion that the Slayer is dead, because if the demons were to find out, it would cause all hell to break loose. Well, the demons find out and all hell breaks loose. Meanwhile, Willow wants to perform a resurrection spell to bring Buffy back, which she was very much against back when Dawn wanted to use it to bring her mother back. Giles also leaves back to England because with no Slayer, well, he has no need to be there. Willow and the gang perform the spell but are interrupted by some demon bikers. And no, I did not make that up. They believe the spell didn't work, but poor Buffy wakes up in her coffin, which has to be one of the most traumatizing things that could possibly happen. When Buffy sees her friends, she's not all quite there. Coming back from the dead is probably very disorienting. She tries to restage her death, but her sister gets involved, and as the platform collapses, Buffy manages to save Dawn. Buffy really doesn't know what is going on, and as the season progresses, we'll learn that she may have been better off dead. Afterlife deals with the consequences of bringing Buffy back from the dead. Playing with magic this powerful can often have disastrous effects, and in this case, bringing Buffy back has also brought with it a body-swapping demon. There's a scene where Anya comes in slicing her face with a knife, and it's actually pretty damn creepy. The demon was brought to life with the spell and can only be killed by reversing the spell, but doing so will kill Buffy as well. So what can they do? Well, Willow uses some magic and makes the spirit solid so Buffy can chop its head off. Tara and Willow were performing this spell together, but Willow pulled away and took over. You can sense that Tara doesn't like how powerful Willow is becoming, which will be one of the biggest themes of season 6. Flooded is more about Buffy learning to take on more responsibilities than it really is about her fighting monsters. Yes, she has to fight a demon, but the real fight is with her burst pipes, bank loans, and piling bills. Giles comes back to offer assistance, but I've always wondered why Tara and Willow don't chip in, seeing as how they're living at Buffy's home. Anya is upset because Xander won't tell the group they're engaged, but he wants to wait for the right moment to tell everyone. He proposed, 5 or 6 months prior? How much longer is he willing to string this poor girl along for? Flooded also introduces us to not the big bad, but 3 annoying turds that will end up summoning the big bad. Warren, the guy who can't get a date so he makes robots, Jonathan, the dork who nearly offed himself, and Andrew Wells, the brother of Tucker Wells, the guy who summoned hellhounds on prom night. These 3 start pretty tame, but man, do things get dark later on. Life cereal, and no, not the one you eat, I know I was disappointed too, has Buffy wanting to get back to a normal life. You know, school, finding work, but school appears to be too much for her because she's been kind of absent from it for a while, and work in the construction field doesn't seem to be the right thing for her either because it seems to be full of demons. Oh, and crybaby guys that can't admit that they were saved by a girl, or who's significantly stronger than them. It's like an entire construction crew of Rileys. The trio are also being annoying little pests because they think they're some goofy comic book villains. The trio aren't the worst characters and they're kind of fun for some comic relief, but they need to do a little better than a little spy van. There's also a nice little moment between Giles and Buffy at the end where she thanks him and knows she can always count on him, but the look on his face says he won't be around much longer. It's Halloween in Sunnydale again, except this is easily the weakest of the Halloween-themed episodes. Xander finally tells the group that he and Anya are engaged, but when Anya starts talking about all the preparation they'll need to do, Xander starts to sweat a bit. I sure hope he doesn't do something incredibly stupid in the near future. Meanwhile, Willow is still using magic for anything and everything, which draws the ire of Tara. The two have a little lover's spat, but Willow does quite possibly the worst thing she's ever done in the series' history when she uses magic to make Tara forget about their argument. It's one thing to kiss someone that isn't your partner, but this is a complete violation of Tara's mind, and things with Willow are starting to get much more serious. The main storyline of the episode is Dawn going out for Halloween, but sneaking away with some boys who turn out to be vampires. It's fine, but the previous year's Halloween episodes were much better. Once More with Feeling is one of the biggest episodes in the show's history. Joss Whedon was always a fan of musicals, so when he was given the opportunity to do one on Buffy, he could not turn it down. This episode is a fan favorite, but not one that really did much for me. There are a lot of funny bits like Anya's song about bunnies, and all the people randomly singing and dancing in the background, but the songs themselves are kind of meh. Anthony Stewart Head does a great job as always, and Amber Benson has a great voice as well. The two actually performed in a Rocky Horror Picture Show anniversary special, and I never thought in a million years that I would see Giles in drag. The episode pushes the main plot points like Tara discovering what Willow did to her, and Giles feeling like maybe Buffy has become a little too reliant on his help. You also have a demon that wants to make Dawn his bride in the underworld, which fits nicely with the show's theme of much older characters being infatuated with young teens. Obviously, this isn't an actual ongoing theme, but it's happened so many times on the show that it's becoming a pattern. I in no way think this episode is bad. I know it's beloved. It just doesn't suit my personal tastes. Tabula Rasa might be the last truly great episode of Season 6. It starts in the cemetery where Spike is confronted by a loan shark. A literal loan shark, which is hilarious. Then after learning that Buffy was actually in heaven when she was resurrected, the Scoobies try to figure out how they can make things better, with Willow suggesting magic, which Tara gives her hell for because magic is all she knows these days. Willow then promises to go a week without magic, but seconds later is casting a spell to make Buffy and Tara forget their worries. It goes wrong because every spell goes wrong, and the entire group suddenly suffers from amnesia. The rest of the episode is just hilarious gags, with my favorites being the interactions between Spike and Giles, because Spike thinks Giles is his father and Anya his trollop, which I guess is a nicer way of saying prostitute.
Father. Oh, God, how I must hate you. What did I do?
There's a lot of fun to this episode, but once the spell is broken, everyone realizes what happened and Tara leaves Willow. Giles also flies back to England and Buffy and Spike start making out, so I guess things worked out for someone. Smashed continues this saga that is Spike and Buffy, with Spike convinced that Buffy wants him, though she basically blows the whole thing off as being emotional because Giles left. The trio are now going full-on comic book villain, with their freeze rate reminiscent of Mr. Freeze. They're still goofy, but they are murdering people now. With Tara gone out of the house, Willow turns Amy back into a human, which is probably the worst thing she could have done, because she just becomes an even worse influence on her, allowing her to divulge more and more into her magic use. If Willow really did care about Tara, she'd give it up. But like all addicts, the high is more important than those that care for you. After a little back and forth, Spike notices that his chip doesn't seem to affect him anymore with Buffy. He even gets a hold of the trio, who tell him his chip is working just fine, so there's something wrong with Buffy. The two get into another fist fight now that Spike knows he can hurt Buffy, and it all leads to them tearing the house down, so to speak. The Buffy and Spike relationship is nothing like the Angel and Buffy relationship. That one was built on love, and this one is built on lust. In Wrecked, Buffy is dealing with her confusing feelings with Spike. On one hand, she enjoys the hot and heavy aspect, but at the same time, she knows in her heart of hearts it's wrong. While Willow's addiction to magic keeps getting worse and worse, Amy brings her to basically a drug dealer where she gets high on some really good stuff. Willow's addiction becomes so great that she brings Dawn with her back to Rack, and in doing so conjures up a demon that chases the girls. Willow then uses her magic while driving a car and nearly gets Dawn killed. If it weren't for Spike and Buffy being in the vicinity, she just might have too. Willow is at a point now where if she doesn't stop, she's either going to get someone killed or push everyone in her life out of it. Buffy notices some similarities with Willow's addiction to magic and her addiction to Spike, so she hangs up garlic around her room to try and prevent Spike from coming in. The trio are back with more wacky ideas when they create an invisibility ray in the episode Gone. With how zany the plans are that these guys hatch, I feel like they read a lot of Silver Age comics. The reason they created the invisibility ray though was so they could spy on women getting bikini waxes at the spa, which is really fucking creepy. Buffy has her usual moping to deal with, and to make things worse, a social worker stops by to basically tell Buffy that unless things improve with Dawn, she could lose guardianship of her sister. The trio accidentally shoot Buffy with the ray, which gives her a bit of freedom. Since no one can see her, she basically throws her responsibilities to the wayside and pulls a bunch of pranks, including messing with her file with the social worker, which likely cost her her job. Willow figures out who turned Buffy invisible in the first place and confronts them. It all just leads to an awkward confrontation between Buffy and the trio. Gone is part silly and comedic, but also kind of dark in a way. But at least Willow is starting to control herself when it comes to her magic usage. If only the same could be said about Buffy and Spike. Double Meat Palace is one of the meh episodes of the season. It's not bad, it just sort of exists. Because of the piling bills and everything that comes with it, Buffy has to get a job at a local fast food joint. We've all worked jobs like these in the past, and they're not glamorous, but Buffy needs the money, so she'll do just about anything. Of course though, she has suspicions about the place, especially whatever it is they put in the secret sauce. Finger licking good. It actually turns out to be a little old lady with a very phallic looking worm that comes out of her head. I don't know who designed it, but it definitely looks like what it looks like. Willow also has to contend with Amy trying to tempt her into using magic and giving her a little hit, but Willow does stand strong and ends their friendship. Anya's vengeance demon friend shows up because Anya wants her to come to the wedding, and she starts getting inside Anya's head a bit, which starts to cause her to have some doubts. The Scoobies really need to rethink their friendships outside of the core group. Things start to get really dark in Dead Things. Look, I'm not the kind of person to throw the word incel around, especially since most people seem to use it these days when someone has a different opinion than them. But I'm pretty confident in saying that the trio are incels. They create a cerebral dampener that they intend on using on an unsuspecting woman so they can turn her into a sex slave. Warren finds his ex-girlfriend Katrina and uses it on her, but she comes to and realizes what was about to happen. Katrina says what they were about to do is rape. Andrew and Jonathan then look confused. But how could they look confused? The woman they were going to force to be their sex slave wasn't doing it willingly. To make matters worse, Warren accidentally kills his ex when she threatens to go to the police. These guys are no longer into comic book buffoonery. They are now just straight up evil. They even try to pin the murder on Buffy when her body is found, but it's ruled a suicide or accident, so the guys are off the hook. However, Buffy does know it was the trio that caused this. Tara and Buffy have a moment where Buffy breaks down and tells her what she and Spike have been doing, and it's interesting that she goes to Tara with this, and not the people who are supposed to be her best friends. A pretty bleak episode all around, but don't worry people, because it only gets bleaker from here. Older and Far Away is basically 45 minutes of Dawn pouting and everyone else suffering because of it. It's Buffy's birthday again and Dawn wants to get her a present, but no one wants to join her, so she starts shoplifting things, including a leather jacket for Buffy. Once Buffy's birthday party starts, a vengeance demon places a curse on the house thanks to Dawn, by the way, and no one is able to leave. To make matters worse, Tara tries using magic to lift the curse, and instead frees a demon from a magical sword that they now have to contend with. There's some fun to be had in the episode. I especially like when Spike shows up with his cat-eating friend Clem. Xander and Anya bring a guy from Xander's work for Buffy to meet, but it's always awkward when friends try to hook you up with someone they know. It's an okay episode, but I find Dawn to be really annoying in this one, and to think, when Buffy was her age, she started slaying, so I don't know why Dawn acts like such a child. As You Were is all about Buffy trying to reclaim who she once was. While working at the Double Meat Palace, she's approached by Riley, who she's shocked to see. He asks her for help in finding a demon, and dropping the day in, day out bore fest that is fast food work, she gets right back into what she's really destined to do. There are feelings that are brought up, and Buffy sort of apologizes for what she did, even though she was not in the wrong. Things get awkward when Buffy meets Riley's wife Sam, and boy did he not waste any time now, did he? Riley thinks the demon's eggs are being hoarded by someone named the Doctor, which Buffy assumes is Spike, except when she asks him, he says he isn't. Things get even more awkward when Riley walks in on them after their lustful ways and discovers the eggs, making Spike out to be quite the liar. Riley coming back caused a mix of emotions within Buffy, but I think seeing Riley with his new wife sort of woke Buffy up to the fact that what she's doing with Spike isn't right and is likely doing herself more harm than good. Buffy ends her relationship with Spike, and let's just hope he takes it well. Hell's Bells is one of the few episodes in the series that I just outright hate. It's the wedding day for Xander and Anya, and because Joss Whedon can't have any of his characters even remotely happy, the entire thing goes to shit. There's some fun moments when Xander's family and friends meet Anya's family and friends, and they have to play it off like they aren't demons. But then you get this old fart who convinces everyone he's Xander and shows the current day Xander that their marriage will be a garbage heap and that he might kill Anya at one point. So Xander, who has been showing little bits of doubt here and there since asking her to marry him, walks out on his own marriage and leaves poor Anya alone up at the altar. This entire thing was all perpetrated by a demon that Anya took vengeance on, and this was his way of payback. Even after Xander learns what happened, he still ditches her. Out of all the main cast, he had the least going for him, but somehow managed to make things work. He has a good job, a loving girlfriend, but throws it all away because of some fake future. I know Joss Whedon really likes to see his characters struggle, but can't just one of them be happy? Normal Again is an interesting one because it has Buffy going back and forth between her world and what may or may not be the real world. It kind of brings into question if the whole Slayer thing isn't just a figment of her imagination. Did she create this because of some mental illness, or is it really all in her head? I don't really think that's the case because it would pull the rug right from under the fans, but I think it makes for an interesting conversation. By the end, Buffy gets an antidote for whatever has caused this, but it ends with the Buffy in the hospital dying, which I think is supposed to signify that Buffy chose the real world with her friends, and this alternate hospitalized one died off, because it can no longer feed off her. I feel like there's a million different ways to look at Normal Again, but it's interesting. Entropy is mostly a Xander and Anya episode, but has everyone else connected in one way or another. Xander tries to apologize to Anya for leaving her alone, but actually kind of makes things worse because he's Xander. This causes Anya to go around and try to get the women in his life to unknowingly wish something harmful on him, but when that doesn't work, she goes to Spike. The two engage in some relations, but unbeknownst to them, the trio had been spying on Buffy through a camera in a lawn gnome at her house, and a camera at the magic shop, so it catches everything between Spike and Anya. Unfortunately for Xander, Willow cracks into the trio's camera and they all see what happens. Xander gets really pissed and starts to fight Spike. But why do people always attack the person their partner slept with? I'm not saying you should be attacking anyone, but the person you should be directing that anger towards is the person who hurt you. But in all fairness, he did abandon Anya, and as far as I'm concerned, that counts as a breakup. Xander is disgusted because how could Anya touch a monster like Spike? And things only get worse when Xander learns that so has Buffy, so he kind of feels betrayed by both women. I'm not saying he's right in how he feels, but none of this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Xander acting like a child. The only good thing to come of this episode is Willow and Tara getting back together, but yeah, that doesn't last very long. Remember way back in the first episode when Joss Whedon wanted to add Eric Balfour as Jesse to the credits because it would make his death more meaningful? Well, in Seeing Red, Joss Whedon finally got to do what he always wanted to. For the first time since joining the show, Amber Benson was added to the opening credits, and anyone who didn't know what this meant was in for a huge shock. This might be one of the darkest, if not the darkest episode in the show's history, and basically ruins a certain character. With Willow and Tara back together, everything seems like it's getting back on track. The trio gets some magical orbs that make them really strong and allows Warren to fight Buffy. Meanwhile, in one of the worst decisions ever, they decide to have Spike attempt to rape Buffy because he doesn't understand what his feelings with Buffy are. I think because of how aggressive they always were, he thought it's what she would want, but it's so horrible. What makes the scene harder to watch is the fact there's no music. So you're just sitting there watching as this happens. And I know Buffy is a little banged up, but she instantly becomes like a damsel in distress and can't fight Spike off like she usually would. It's all very disturbing, and for me basically ruins Spike as a character. Spike was never a good guy, but this was the worst thing they could have made him do. Spike then leaves town so he can become the man she needs, but for me, it's just never the same. After Buffy thwarts the trio like she usually does, Warren returns with a gun and shoots Buffy along with Tara. When you thought the episode couldn't get any more depressing, they go and kill Tara. It's interesting that the trio has tried all these different ways of taking care of the Slayer, but the one thing that finally causes some real damage is just a gun. Not a freeze ray or invisibility, not demons or magic, just a gun. This episode was very controversial for its scene with Spike and slammed by activists for killing off Tara. People claimed Buffy was homophobic and was always anti-LGBT. They said Tara was merely added so she could be killed off, or was nothing more than a stereotype. The thing people are missing though is Joss Whedon always said that the show is at its best when characters suffer. They can never have a happy, loving relationship because otherwise people would never tune in. Even all the way back in season 1, the characters joked that they would never have a normal relationship and that they were all doomed.
None of us are ever gonna have a happy, normal relationship.
We're doomed.
Yeah.
Seeing red is highly controversial and only adds to what is an already depressing season. Now that Tara has been killed, this awakens something inside Willow, a dark Willow. With Tara's death, Willow goes into full revenge mode. Warren discovers Buffy survived, but his real worries should lie with Willow. Willow goes to the magic shop to get some black magic books, but why would they just have those available for purchase? I'm not sure. Dark Willow removes the bullet from Buffy's chest, and now all she wants is Warren. For such a powerful witch, I don't know why she needs her friends to drive her around. When Willow finds Warren, she kills him, but he just turns out to be a robotic decoy. Willow finds him in the woods, but not even an axe to the back is enough to stop her. She ties Warren up with some vines and slowly drives a bullet into his chest, until eventually just tearing the skin right off his body and killing him. All season, Willow had been dealing with her addiction, and in her weakened state and her emotions at an all-time high, she's become something unlike anything the group has ever seen before. With Warren dealt with, this only leaves Jonathan and Andrew. But what if they just let Willow get her revenge? Maybe when she did, she'd go back to the old lovable Willow. It's not like the trio doesn't deserve it. Anyways, Anya warns the guys while they're in jail. Luckily, it takes a long time for Willow to break through the wall, which gives Buffy enough time for them to escort the guys out before Willow can kill them. The show then has its Terminator 2 moment when Willow takes over a large truck and starts ramming it into their stolen police car. They manage to escape after Willow loses steam and needs to recharge. Willow sees Rax so she can get her fix, and she kills him in the process. Buffy tries talking her out of it, but Willow is too far gone at this point. Willow attacks Jonathan and Andrew, but are being protected by a spell put forth by Anya. I love how with all this magic, Buffy's go-to is still to pummel people into submission. Willow gets the upper hand in the fight, but one of my all-time favorite moments in the entire series takes place when Giles walks in like a fucking boss, saying, "I'd like to test that theory," after Willow claims there's no one in the world with the power to stop her. For a season as miserable as this one, at least there's this moment. The season finale picks right up where the last episode ended, with Giles coming to Buffy's aid. Giles holds Willow with some magic he picked up from a coven in England, and then he and Buffy have a lovely chat about everything that has gone on while he was away. But while they're catching up like good buddies, Willow sets herself free and drains Giles of all his magic. Then she decides the only thing left to do now is to end the world. While Buffy and Dawn are sucked down into a crypt and forced to fight monsters, the true hero is Xander, Willow's best friend. Willow and Xander were best friends from childhood, so it's fitting that he would be the one to talk some sense into her. Yeah, he gets his ass kicked, but he's not willing to give up on her and gives what fans have dubbed the yellow crayon speech. The whole overcoming evil through the power of love and friendship is a little cliche, but given the circumstances, I think it's fitting. I think it also helps redeem Xander a bit for what he's done throughout the season. It's a pretty good moment, and Allison's acting I think is particularly well done here. Oh, and Spike got his soul back, so that'll be interesting when he returns. Because of how dark season 6 was, and many of the controversies within it, Joss Whedon decided to go to a back-to-basics approach with the series, taking Buffy and her sister back to where it all began, Sunnydale High.
Grr, arg.
Back to Basics is really what Lessons is all about. The new Sunnydale High, which looks to have a lot less personality than the original one, is open for business. But even though it is fancier and more high-tech, it still is built above the Hellmouth. So of course this means there's spooky shenanigans afoot. Dawn and some other students come across some ghosts, and Buffy has to save the day like she always does. Buffy finds Spike with Justin Timberlake hair in the basement of the school, but he's more off his rocker than usual, so he's of no help. Xander finds a talisman because there's always some ancient relic, and he destroys it, sending the ghosts packing. After this little event, the students Buffy saved seem to turn a new leaf, and the school principal, Robin Wood, offers her a counseling position so she can help troubled kids. This was all done as an excuse to get Buffy back inside Sunnydale High, so they could try and get the feel of the first 3 seasons. Though later on the school is pretty much abandoned, and most of the time is spent inside Buffy's home. The title Beneath You has several meanings. For one, it refers to the graboid-like monster terrorizing a poor woman from beneath the ground. And 2, it refers to Spike regaining his soul. The main point of the episode is Buffy discovering that Spike has a soul. Since she's seen him again after his unfortunate act in season 6, he was acting kinda nutty. But that was because those darn ghosts were messing with his head. He does act much differently in Beneath You, but it's not until he talks about Angel not mentioning how painful it was that Buffy finally realizes what he did. Spike still has a long ways to go before Buffy will ever accept him changing, and I wouldn't blame her if she never did. Same time, same place gives us the return of Willow after she left with Giles. Except when she returns, bodies start appearing missing their skin, and neither Willow nor her friends can see one another. Willow's guilt over what she did has caused this little invisibility mishap, because even though she does want to see her friends, she's still weary if they'll accept her or not. Even though they do show up at the airport to welcome her home, but they never see each other. Although her friends can't see her, Anya and Spike can because they're demons. There's a funny scene where Spike appears to have lost his mind again, because he's speaking to Buffy and Xander and Willow simultaneously. But both parties think he's lost it and he's just talking to himself. They also have to fight a demon named Gnarl, who likes to slowly eat the skin off his victims. And I don't know why, but he makes Willow's skin look pretty tasty. Kinda like how Spike made that grass look so good in The Land Before Time. Eventually, everyone is able to see each other again, and Willow begins the healing process with her friends. It's nice to have the core group back together, though I'm still missing Giles. Help harkens back to the days of old and feels like it came straight from season 1. There's a young girl at Sunnydale High named Cassie who believes she's going to die. Buffy, thinking the girl is suicidal, reports it to the principal, who sort of brushes it off. So Buffy enlists Dawn to make friends with her. In the meantime, there are a group of cloaked boys that are going to perform a demonic ritual so they can become rich. Help feels like the episode Reptile Boy, except the boys in this situation aren't nearly as rapey. Buffy does everything she can to help this girl, including fighting off a demon to save her, but ultimately she knew she was going to die. The young girl had a heart issue, and like with Buffy's mother, there was nothing she could do to save her. A monster she can fight, a heart issue she can't. It's kinda sad imagining what this young girl must have felt in her final moments, because she knew what was coming. Help is an alright episode that feels very old school for Buffy, and Tim Taylor must be very disappointed to see how Brad turned out. Selfless is an Anya-focused storyline and shows her backstory that we got some hints at when Troll Olaf showed up. Anya was married to Olaf at the time, but his infidelity caused her to change him into a troll once she became a vengeance demon. Since Anya has returned as a vengeance demon, she was called upon by a college girl who was upset after her boyfriend broke up with her in front of the entire fraternity. This of course leads to Buffy getting involved, and her and Xander arguing because suddenly Buffy is all gung-ho about killing someone that was a friend and lover because they did evil, when she's turned a blind eye to things that both Angel and Spike have done in the past. Selfless at its core is about Anya and Xander. Xander still loves her, despite everything that has happened between the two. But by the end, the deaths are undone, Anya is returned mortal, and her and Xander are still going their own ways. Except Anya now has even less purpose in her life than when she started. Also, there's a goofy CGI bug monster that's kind of lame. Him is yet another throwback to the earlier seasons. It's basically a take on the season 2 episode Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, where Xander had all the girls after him when a love spell went wrong. But here it's a jock at Dawn's school whose jacket seems to make the ladies fall in love with him. Dawn falls for him, Buffy falls for him, and things nearly go too far. Again, older people, younger kids. It's an okay episode that has some funny bits. My favorite is when Spike and Xander go to RJ's house to speak with his brother Lance, who used to be the popular guy back in the day, only to find he's kind of a loser, and his mommy still gets him snacks.
Do you have guests down there? There's little boxes of raisins if you want snacks.
We really gotta go.
Thankfully, Spike and Xander save the day by destroying the magical jacket that makes women do incredibly stupid things, like say blowing up the principal with a rocket launcher or robbing a bank. Standard Buffy stuff, but nothing too memorable. Conversations with dead people is interesting in that none of the main characters in the show interact with one another and all have their own side stories going on. Buffy encounters a vampire she went to school with who became a psychology major. So between bouts of fighting, he psychoanalyzes her and basically says she has daddy issues. Dawn deals with a ghost that she believes is keeping her from her mother. Willow meets the young girl Cassie who passed away earlier in the season, telling Willow that Tara wants her to take her own life before she kills everyone. Spike attacks and kills a woman, and Jonathan and Andrew return to Sunnydale with Andrew killing Jonathan in the school's basement because Warren's ghost told him to. This episode is all about building up the big bad for the season, revealing to Willow what is coming and manipulating various characters into seeing and believing things that might not be true. This again brings us back to the earlier seasons when the first was causing Angel to see visions and believe the only way he would be free of his pain and guilt was to end his life. A pretty good episode overall, and it's interesting how Buffy reacts when she learns that Spike sired her vampire schoolmate only recently, which means he may have gone back to his evil ways even with a soul. Sleeper continues the same night as the previous episode, as Buffy now needs to find out if what the vampire told her was true. Is Spike siring vampires again? Buffy begins following Spike and she tells him to feed on a woman he's with. He runs and Buffy turns into another Spike. Since Spike's return and gaining his soul, he hasn't really been acting like himself. He's been seeing and hearing things and doesn't have any memory of what he's done. Like Angel before him, it's actually the first that is making him do things that he really doesn't want to. Buffy finds Spike and kills the vampires he sired, but because he's too much of a danger at this point, she needs to keep a closer eye on him. It's not mentioned anywhere that it is the first, but knowing what we do, I think it's pretty safe to assume that it is, especially when it comes to the shape-shifting, as the first can take any form of someone who's already dead anyways. There's a B-plot with Giles and some hooded men, but that'll become more clear as time goes on. Never Leave has Buffy questioning more about what is controlling Spike, because even though he has done some pretty evil things, she thinks he's still good. This leads me back a few episodes where Buffy was so ready to kill Anya for what she did, but here she's willing to give Spike a chance, which kinda confirms what Xander said to her.
If there's a mass-murdering demon that you're, say, boning, then it's all gray area.
Andrew also gets caught by Willow when she goes to the meat shop for some blood, and brings him back with her because he's clearly up to something as well. Those robed figures seen in the previous episode attack Buffy's home and take Spike, but not before Buffy finally realizes what they're up against. These are the same robed figures she fought before when Angel was being tormented by the first. Spike's blood is then used to open a seal and bring forth the Turok Han, an ancient race of vampire that even vampires fear. They're basically big Neanderthal vampires with even more strength. My favorite part of the episode is when the Watchers Council, minus Giles, blows up because f*** those guys. Bring on the Night has Buffy's first confrontation with the new vampire and the return of a familiar face. The group asks Andrew what he's been up to, so he shows them the seal where he killed Jonathan, though he leaves that part out. They cover it back up and run into Principal Wood, who also has a shovel, which isn't weird at all. Giles shows up and brings with him the potentials. Young girls that could be the next in line to be the Slayer, and needs Buffy's protection as the Watchers Council has gone kablooey, and the first is trying to completely erase the Slayer lineage. I'm sure I'm going to be alone on this, but I hate the potentials as a concept and the characters themselves. They're all pretty annoying. They can't act for the most part, and Kennedy? Kennedy. Need I say more? There's no way Willow would really be with someone that is as insufferable as her. She's far more annoying than Riley could ever be. The worst thing about these characters is they all take time away from the people we actually want to see. This is the final season. Why am I listening to a bunch of snot-nosed brats when I should be watching the Scoobies do their thing? But hey, at least Giles is returned. One of the potentials runs off, she gets killed by the Uber Vamp, and Buffy gets her ass beat. I have an issue with the Turok Han, but I'll vent more when we get to that. The episode then ends with a rousing rah-rah speech by Buffy that's just fine. Showtime puts a lot of focus on the potentials, which for me is excruciating. There's a really awkward scene between Kennedy and Willow where she's trying to convince Willow to sleep in the bed with her, and you can just see how uncomfortable this makes her feel. More potentials join, they start training. Buffy discovers one in their midst is actually the first. It's also revealed that Buffy's resurrection caused something to go wrong, which is why the first is after them. But why didn't this happen after the first time Buffy died? The Turok Han attacks Buffy's house, but is repelled by Willow's magic. They lure the monster to a construction site and Buffy kills it. Even though we saw the Turok Han mop the floor with Buffy in the previous episode, she's suddenly strong enough to fight and kill it. The writers change the power of the Turok Han whenever it's necessary for the story, and this only gets worse later on in the season. Buffy shouldn't have been able to beat it so easily in the very next episode, but the writing for the show has been pretty sloppy for a while now. Potential has more fun with the Slayerettes, and even more join the group, which is great, because I wanted even more attention taken away from the main characters. The idea behind Season 7 was to take things back to the basics, to go back to Sunnydale High and try to have some fun, but halfway through the season we're just stuck in Buffy's house with a bunch of kids. Buffy continues the training with the girls, including having them face off against an actual vampire without her help. Remember when Giles took away her power so she could face a vampire as part of some Watcher test, and it blew up into being this big thing? Now she locks these girls who have never been a Slayer or even faced a vampire to kill one without her help. We also get the Scoobies looking for a new Potential, which Dawn gets mistaken for at one point, but it actually turns out to be a friend of hers. The episode is what it is, but I just can't find a reason to care about the Potential storyline. The Killer in Me has Willow facing the guilt of what happened to Tara and what she did to Warren, but it's done in quite possibly the worst way imaginable. There are 3 plots going on. Giles takes the Potentials to meet the first Slayer, except for Kennedy, who feigns illness so she can take Willow on a date, and Spike, whose chip is malfunctioning, causing him immense pain, so Buffy has to bring him to the abandoned Initiative lab to see if they can fix it. For some reason, Willow kisses Kennedy, and then turns into Warren because of her guilt about what happened in Season 6. Everyone thinks she's the first, because last time Andrew saw Warren, that was the case, but they quickly realize it is Willow. It turns out Amy put a hex on her because she was all butthurt, and Willow is starting to behave more and more like Warren, even going to the extent of reenacting when Tara was shot. Thankfully, Kennedy is able to fix everything through the power of kissing, which is what started this whole thing to begin with. It's good that Willow was finally able to deal with her grief over Tara, but to do it with one of the worst characters in the show's history was such an odd choice. Allison does a good job acting wise, but the writing is some of the worst the show has seen. There's also a little bit where everyone thinks Giles is the first, but that's quickly resolved and everyone is best friends by the end.
You think I'm evil if I bring a group of girls on a camping trip and don't touch them?
First Date has both Xander and Buffy going on dates, and feels more like classic Buffy than what we've been seeing for a little bit now. For one, the Potentials are barely on screen, except for Kennedy, who has to be around anytime Willow is, which is annoying. Xander meets a woman at the hardware store and he goes on a date, but she turns out to be a demon that wants to use his blood to open the seal in the basement of the school. They really need to cement over that thing. Buffy gets caught by Principal Wood snooping around, and he asks her out on a date, which I think is kinda weird given his position in the school. Buffy learns he likes to play Demon Hunter, and it's up to Buffy, Wood, and Spike to save Xander before he's gutted like a fish. The first is also revealed to be pretty dumb, because it contacts Andrew again in the form of Warren, but doesn't realize Andrew is wearing a wire, and they recorded everything it said. First Date is a meh episode, but it's better than some of the ones we've been getting lately. Get It Done has Buffy going to a shadow realm where the first Slayer is and being offered more power in order to fight the oncoming threat. Buffy is told to go home by Wood, but he has a little gift for her that was handed down to him from his mother. It's these strange shadow figures that open a gateway, and thank God Dawn can suddenly read Sumerian. But there's a nasty little trade-off in that once Buffy heads inside, a demon attacks the group. Buffy yells at the guys that made the original Slayer line, rejecting their power, and is shown a vision that basically tells her they're screwed. One of the Potentials also takes her own life after spending all night talking to the first. And then Buffy holds a meeting so she can tell everyone how stupid and weak that girl was, which kind of made me laugh at just how crass it was.
Chloe was an idiot. Chloe was stupid. She was weak.
Also, who the hell put Kennedy in charge of anything? She's supposed to be a Potential training like the others, but now she's the one giving out commands? Oh yeah, and there's like a million Turok Han. So if Buffy struggled with one, well... Storyteller takes the focus away from all the doom and gloom and lets us see the events through the eyes of Andrew as he documents what has happened and what is happening. It's sort of like the episode Superstar, where events are exaggerated and made to look a lot more glamorous than maybe they really are. Like when Andrew's version of the events with Dark Willow has him being the one who countered her spells and not Anya. In the meantime, all hell seems to be breaking loose at the school, mirroring the same kind of things Buffy dealt with when she was in high school. Buffy and Wood surmise that it's the seal causing all of this trouble, so they need Andrew's blood to seal it back up. since he was the one who originally opened it when he killed Jonathan. However, Buffy just scares him because it was his tears that were needed to seal it and not his blood. Storyteller is definitely one of the highlights of the season. It's funny, it has some heart, and it offers a bit of redemption for a character that really should be in prison.
Here's something I think you're going to be interested in, gentle viewers. Look at the fine work Xander did on replacing that window sash.
Lies My Parents Told Me gives more insight into who Spike is and his connection to Robin Wood. Through the season, Spike has had this trigger, a song that would send him into a rage, which the first was toying with to get him to attack. Giles and Wood devise a plan to finally get rid of Spike once and for all. So Giles takes Buffy on patrol, while Wood brings Spike to a secluded room, where he plays this song, triggering Spike's evil side to take over. There's a good point made that Spike only killed Wood's mom because it's kill or be killed. That's sort of the relationship between vampires and slayers, so he really didn't have any other choice. Still though, Spike comes to terms with his mother rejecting him after she became a vampire, and overcomes his feeling of guilt, which in turn renders the power of this song ineffective. Once Buffy realizes what Giles and Wood were going to do, she finds Spike, a badly beaten Wood, and basically tells him the next time this happens, she'll let Spike kill him, because Spike is too important for the fight ahead. I like this episode mainly because it's a Spike-centered episode. I'm not the biggest fan of Robin Wood. He's an okay character, and I completely understand his feelings for wanting to get revenge. But as Buffy points out, he wants to get revenge on a man who no longer exists. Dirty Girls introduces us to the first right-hand man, Caleb, a crazed preacher turned serial killer who really doesn't like women. Faith also makes a return, who is off helping Angel, so at least we're starting to get the gang back together. This episode is all about raising the stakes and questioning whether or not Buffy is capable of leading the potentials into battle. After Caleb injures a potential, he tricks Buffy into coming after him and bringing the potentials with her. Things go very badly. Some of the girls die, and Xander loses an eye, which I always hated. Caleb is supposed to be unlike anything Buffy has ever faced, but that seems to be the case with every season. Buffy begins to question if what she's doing is the right thing, and it will all come to head in the very next episode. Also, there's a funny bit when Andrew is telling the potentials who Faith is, and says at one point she fought a volcanologist, but in his mind she fought an actual Vulcan, which is pretty funny. Empty Places sees the residents of Sunnydale begin to evacuate town because of the impending doom. I love how everyone in town now just suddenly knows that some crazy shit is going down in Sunnydale, and they're like, we're getting the f*** out of here. Andrew and Spike go off on their own to chase a lead and have some pretty hilarious moments together, especially when they start talking about onion blossoms.
Tell anyone we had this conversation, I'll bite you.
Right.
Things come to a head when the potentials start to take a liking to Faith, because she isn't always running them ragged. She lets them party and unwind a bit. Buffy and Faith get into an argument, and the house holds a vote kicking her out and making Faith the new leader. Even Dawn tells her to get out because it's her home too. Excuse me, little girl, but you're not even real. Kennedy also runs her mouth a bit because somehow she thinks she's a main character and ruins every scene she's in. The episode where everybody sleeps with each other. Seriously. Buffy has to deal with being kicked out of her house and kicks another poor guy out of his. Spike returns from his trip with Andrew and is disgusted to find that they all turned on Buffy. Then everybody gets laid. Xander and Anya get busy. Faith and Wood do their thing. I finally understand why he's named Wood. Faith and Kennedy enjoy themselves as well, in what I guess is the first ever lesbian sex scene on network TV, which I guess is something to be proud of, but it involves one of the worst characters ever put on television, and a character I in no way believe Willow would actually ever be with. Their whole relationship feels like a rebound for Willow, and when she comes to her senses, Kennedy is gone. Buffy and Spike sleep together too, but they literally sleep together. There's no funny business going on here. The next day, Faith leads the potentials into a trap where a bunch of them die because of an explosion, and Buffy faces Caleb again, where she finds a magical scythe that never existed until this very moment. I think the scythe being in the stone is an obvious metaphor to King Arthur and Excalibur, and shows Buffy that she is meant to be the one true leader. Picking up where the last episode left off, End of Days has the surviving potentials discovering an unconscious Faith, and unfortunately, Kennedy survived. Some Turok Hans show up that gives me hope Kennedy might be done for, but Buffy arrives with her +10 scythe and one-shots all of them. Of course, Buffy is put back in charge because she was right all along, and everyone should have listened. Using some info Spike relayed to her, Buffy finds an ancient pyramid in the cemetery that she's been patrolling the past 7 years and is like, never noticed this before. She finds this woman who claims she's a guardian and has been watching the Watchers. It's all very convoluted and just comes out of nowhere, so Buffy can realize she has this strength because of these women and not the men. Buffy almost gets killed, but Angel shows up to make the save, although it's really just so she can give Angel a kiss so Spike will get jealous, because no matter how many times she tells a guy she has feelings for them, the moment Angel shows up, all of that goes away. I know they wanted to ramp up tension because Spike can be unpredictable, but couldn't they have found a better way than Angel showing up for 5 minutes so Buffy can kiss him and cause him jealousy? The final episode, Chosen, is all about closure, ending everything we have come to love the past 7 years. Even if everything hasn't been stellar, it's always hard to say goodbye to characters you grew up with, especially if you watched this show when it originally aired. Caleb finally gets dealt with and Angel hands Buffy an amulet meant for a champion. Buffy talks things over with Spike, telling him how she feels and hands Spike the Deus Ex Machina. The following day, Buffy gives the team a rah-rah girl power speech, which is kind of cringe. I'm not saying she can't say something to motivate the group, but the messaging that this show has done so well saying, without really saying, is just lazily thrown in everyone's face, and it only gets worse from here. The group then prepares for the following day because they're taking the fight directly to the Hellmouth. Having the characters go back to the school is a good way to bring things back to how this series all started. It's also a good excuse to give a brief scene of the core members walking the halls for one last time, even if it isn't exactly the same school. Buffy and the Potentials then go down into the Hellmouth, where the message is laid on even thicker, when their plan is revealed to awaken every Potential and turn them all into Slayers. It's not that the message is bad, it's just the writing for it is. I'm not sure what happened from when the show started to how it ended, but they used to be much more clever with these things. Now it's really heavy-handed. Also, Buffy's plan is kinda stupid. Remember how easily the Turok Han kicked her ass when it first came on the scene? How did she figure a handful of Slayers would take on literally thousands of them, if not more? And the Potentials, even with Slayer powers, should still get their asses kicked, because they've never faced anything like this before. I don't care how much training they were doing. Gaining magical strength doesn't immediately give you the power to defeat something that nearly killed Buffy, who has had years of training as an actual Slayer. What's even worse is the entire thing ends with Spike and his Deus Ex Machina amulet that shines sunlight on all the Turok Han, killing them all in one fell swoop. That wasn't part of her plan. She had no idea the amulet would do that. If she did, then why not give it to a champion that sunlight wouldn't kill? Also, if the theme of the show is supposed to be about strong women, then why have a man be the one that saves the day at the end? It seems to go against what they had envisioned when the show first started. I would have much preferred a good one-on-one with Buffy fighting the first evil, while the Potentials and her friends fend off the Turok Han, but struggle in doing so because they are supposed to be significantly stronger. Except sometimes one Turok Han is incredibly powerful and can nearly kill a Slayer, and other times normal humans can fight them. I've never really liked the show's finale. It always felt like it just sort of comes out of nowhere. It doesn't help that the writing for season 7 has been pretty lackluster, and we really just spent the majority of the time with characters we don't care about inside Buffy's home. It's also annoyed me how Anya dies and Xander barely reacts. He says something to Andrew about that's his girl after she saved Andrew, but then is immediately back to making jokes about Starbucks. Maybe he's in shock, but I always hated how this was handled. Anya's death in particular was poorly executed, and Emma Caulfield has come out and said she was given an unceremonious death because Joss Whedon sort of threw a fit when she asked to be killed off. Which wouldn't be surprising because some of the allegations directed towards Joss Whedon by many of the cast members would suggest he's not the guy he tries to portray himself to be. I'm definitely in the minority when it comes to the finale of the show. It seems like a lot of Buffy fans really love it, but for me it's a huge letdown, and Graduation Part 2 would have been a much better series finale. Even though the show ended, Buffy's journey wasn't over yet. In 2007, Joss Whedon partnered with Dark Horse Comics to produce Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8. The original run was only supposed to be 25 issues, but was popular enough that it grew to 40. The comics continued with seasons 9 through 12 and are considered canon by Joss Whedon. There are also lots of spin-offs and one-shots, with some being considered canon and others not, so it gets kinda confusing. Buffy also led to the spin-off show Angel, which itself had a fairly successful run of 5 seasons and 110 episodes, and honestly I think it's the better written show, except for that damn ending. Other spin-offs were tossed around, but for one reason or another never came to fruition. In 2001, Joss Whedon began development on a Buffy the Vampire Slayer animated series. The show would air on Fox Kids, but when Fox Kids ceased operation, the project languished until it eventually died. A 4-minute presentation was created that would help sell the idea, with most of the cast coming in to do voices, except for Sarah Michelle Gellar, who was replaced with voice actress Giselle Lauren, an actress who was already very familiar voicing Buffy, as she had done so in some of the video games, and does a really good job imitating Sarah. The fact the show wasn't picked up by anyone seems mind-boggling to me. A Buffy the Vampire Slayer animated series is a no-brainer. The show was set to take place during the events of Season 1, placing the characters back in high school. They wanted the cartoon to be the Batman the Animated Series of Buffy. Some scripts were written, but nothing ever went anywhere. In 2008, Nicholas Brendan posted on his audio blog about the cancelled Buffy animated series, saying, "I know that there's been talk about the Buffy animated series, which we did, gosh, like 3 years ago? You know, to be quite honest with you, I don't know why it didn't go further, but I know that there's been a lot of hubbubaloo on the old YouTube there, and I checked it out and I almost got a little teary. You know, I hadn't seen Xander in a while, and it was kinda neat to kinda go back into that library and into that life, and all that stuff. But yeah, so listen, I'll go on record by saying I would love to do an animated series for Buffy. That being said, I might be the only one, but I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to talk to anybody about it, so you know, keep your fingers crossed." In a 2017 cast reunion with EW, the cast all came out and said the only way they would come back to the Buffy universe was if there were ever an animated series, with even Sarah herself expressing interest. This, however, was dependent on Joss Whedon and before many of the allegations about him came to the surface. In 2001, another spin-off series was in the works called Ripper and would focus on Anthony Stewart Head's Rupert Giles. It was pitched as this ghost story about a sad, lonely man with no real purpose anymore after leaving Buffy, and week after week he would deal with various ghosts. The original plan for the show was to make it a mini-series for the BBC, but as things evolved, it turned into a 2-hour direct-to-video movie, and then a 90-minute direct-to-video movie. Rights to characters, money, and Joss Whedon being stretched too thin led to the project never coming to fruition, which is a shame because a Giles standalone show or direct-to-video movie could have been great. Around the ending of Buffy's 7th season, Jane Espenson, who was a writer and producer on Buffy, made a pitch for a proposed spin-off called Slayer School. The show would have focused on some of the potentials and may have included characters like Willow, but beyond that, much isn't known. Joss Whedon really had no interest in doing it, and it basically fell flat on its face. Following the end of Buffy, there was an idea thrown around of having Faith come back and have her own show. While Eliza appreciated they wanted her to return, she felt the time had passed. She loved the character and knew she would be in good hands. But there were other things she wanted to focus on, and felt like she would have huge shoes to fill replacing Buffy. The idea was to have Faith in a kung fu-like role, traveling from town to town on a motorcycle and solving whatever that episode's problem was. It seems like it would have been more episodic than serialized like Buffy was, and I think it could have worked. But it really just came down to Eliza not having much interest. The final spin-off that was proposed was a Spike TV movie. The movie was to follow Spike during his time when he left Buffy between seasons 6 and 7, and how he spent his time with his newly regained soul. By 2006, the project was considered to be dead, and by 2011, James Marsters said he would no longer be playing Spike in any new projects. His reasoning was that he was visibly starting to age, and it wouldn't make sense to have a much older looking vampire. Later in 2016, James did come out and say that he would be willing to play Spike again, if the technology were good enough that it could de-age him and make him look like the younger Spike. I don't think this would really work out well though, because if big budget movies can't do this without it looking fake and plastic, I don't know how a TV movie could. Since the movie was never made, the script was taken and used for the basis of a graphic novel called Spike Into the Light, which follows Spike with a newly regained soul as he struggles with day-to-day life and tries to find redemption for what he's done. For years since the end of the show, a proposed reboot has been in talks. Joss has come out and stated that the reboot was going to be led by a Slayer of color, his words, not mine, and it would focus more on diversity and modern politics. The idea of a reboot has gotten a lot of pushback from fans. It seems no one is really interested in seeing a new Buffy, as her story has already been told. Now, an entirely different Slayer could work, but I think expectations would be so high that no matter what they do, it's still likely to fail. In January 2024, Dolly Parton, whose company Sandollar produced the series, came out and said work on a reboot is still in the talks and that they're currently revamping it, which is amazing wordplay. The one thing that may be holding the series back from ever returning are the controversies surrounding Joss Whedon. Over the years, he's kind of been blacklisted from Hollywood. In 2017, his ex-wife, Kai Cole, accused him of pushing feminist ideology while cheating on her with cast, crew, and even fans. Things got worse for Joss in 2020 when Ray Fisher, who played Cyborg in the Justice League movie, which Whedon came in to finish, accused Whedon of gross and abusive behavior on set. While Gal Gadot, who played Wonder Woman, came to Ray's aid and she was shocked by the way Joss spoke to her and claims he threatened her career. In 2021, Charisma Carpenter, who played Cordelia on Buffy and Angel, made a post on Twitter, now known as X, of her experiences with Joss Whedon, saying he abused his power while on set, causing a toxic work environment, and calling her fat to colleagues of hers when she was 4 months pregnant. Charisma also claimed he mocked her religious faith and asked her if she was keeping it, referring to the child growing inside her. She's also claimed that she was punished for being pregnant and her character was killed off on Angel because of it, which definitely tracks considering how Anya's death was handled when Emma asked Joss to kill her off. Joss doesn't seem to be like to be told what to do, especially by women. Other cast members came to Charisma's defense. Amber Benson, who played Tara, said the set was toxic. Buffy star Sarah Michelle Gellar came out and issued a statement that said, "While I am proud to have my name associated with Buffy Summers, I don't want to be forever associated with the name Joss Whedon." She's also said that she will never share her full story, because in the end, it doesn't help anyone. Michelle Trachtenberg, who played Dawn, made a statement after Sarah, saying that the behavior on set was not appropriate, and ending her post by saying, "There was a rule saying he's not allowed in a room alone with Michelle again," which is vague and could mean a lot of horrific things. To make matters even worse, Joss Whedon has always said that he saw himself the most in the character Xander, and in the Buffy Season 8 comic book, Xander and Dawn begin a relationship. These comics are also considered canon and were produced and partly written by Whedon, so make of that what you will. Not every cast member noticed the behavior while filming. While James Marsters said he was heartbroken about the experiences his castmates had faced, James said while appearing on the podcast Inside of You, hosted by Michael Rosenbaum, that he felt Joss Whedon was an intense guy that put himself under a lot of pressure. But he did say, "Everyone has their own experience, and I'm not going to say they didn't." So while he may not have witnessed the same things as others, he wasn't about to downplay what they've come out and said. Also, because he's a guy, there's a good chance that Whedon acted differently around him than he did with the women. What's interesting is People magazine had a reunion back in 2022, and the only two people that weren't sitting with the rest of the main cast were Joss Whedon and Nicholas Brendan, who's been battling his own demons over the years. Although they did all awkwardly pose together for a photo, which I'm sure was pretty uncomfortable. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a cultural phenomenon. It helped raise a generation of young women to embrace their strength, challenge societal norms, and navigate the complexities of growing up. Through its blend of horror, humor, and heart, the series tackled issues of identity, empowerment, friendship, and love. And while it was mostly targeted at a female audience, I think the messages about growing up and overcoming the obstacles of adolescence into adulthood resonate with everyone. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed our look at Buffy the Vampire Slayer. From its beginnings as a small cult movie to the groundbreaking series that transformed television, Buffy's journey is a testament to the power of good storytelling and even better characters. Thank you for watching and stay spooky!
Ooh, you could go with the full black secret agent look.
Or the puffy shirt, pirate/.
The Earth is definitely doomed.